Story 1. My sister lied to my dad's face, saying I was abusing her. With our grandma coaching her, I finally threw them both out. A year later, Grandma's standing on our porch wanting another chance. Me and my entire family all hate my grandma on my dad's side except for, well, my dad. It all started when I was 7 years old because whenever we were all at a restaurant together and I was ordering, she would pinch my arm and tell me I was disgustingly skinny and I needed to eat more, otherwise I would die alone. She would then plaster this look of pity on her face as if she felt really bad for me. For context, my mom is Asian and my dad is Irish, so me and my siblings were all Asian baddies, aka naturally skinny. But her comments always made me really insecure, especially since I always ate exactly the amount I wanted to. LOL. And to make things worse, my dad gave her a spare key to our house. So once in a while, when we were all fast asleep, she would barge right in and start going through all our things. My mom's files, me and my siblings' shared wardrobe, everything. And since she refused to wear adult diapers, she would always leave poop stains around our home, including the radiator, the couch, and all the chairs. Which literally grosses me out to even think about. Anyway, since I'm the oldest, when I turned 15, my mom finally told me the tea. Before me and my siblings were born, my granny always made racist comments to my mom. Sometimes she'd raise her eyes until they looked like slits and say, "Hey, see, now we look the same." And whenever my mom would cook meals for them, ones that took hours to make, by the way, she'd scream, "No, don't tell. Tell me you cooked the dog. Lame." And I kept all my mom's gossip from my sibs and dad, but my brother hated her regardless. LOL. But my little sister, Millie, on the other hand, she was always a little rebellious. My parents could say the sky was blue, and she would argue that it was purple. She always wanted to disagree. So when she turned 12, she chose to become my granny's little doll. She started off by making racist jokes like a pick-me, but for race instead of gender. Sometimes she'd go through our mom's files and send photos to Granny. But the breaking point came when we finally moved house and Granny no longer had a spare key because Millie took the liberty of printing her a new one. That's when I finally fessed up to my mom to watch out for her. She told me she'd keep an eye out, but we both figured it wouldn't cause any major problems. I was 16 when my granny's 85th birthday was coming up. My dad said that one of us, my brother or sister, had to plan it, and if they didn't do a good job, then they'd find themselves sleeping outside for the rest of the year. You see, I had already volunteered dozens of times to be the one to step up and hang out with her. So, I guess my dad wanted my siblings to put in effort, too. But if you're the oldest child, then you understand that title means constantly doing shit you don't want to do. So, when Millie came to me right after my dad left and asked if I could plan it and pretend like she was the one to do it, I immediately agreed. It was just easier that way. Fast forward to my granny's big day. I themed the entire thing as St. Patrick's Day since that was the day that my granny's birthday fell on. And as you can probably tell, she is mad patriotic. I made everyone wear jerseys, shamrocks everywhere. And for dinner, we had homemade roast chicken with roast potatoes and boiled carrots. A classic. As soon as the chicken came out of the oven, my sister shouted, "Jich, I did such a good job. This chicken is amazing." I just rolled my eyes and let her have her fun. But as we sat down, my granny started praising her. "Millie, did you really do all this all for me?" She then put her hand on her heart as if she was really touched. "Yes, I did. You know, Tyra, my name, was insisting that I cook Asian-style duck, but I said, F no," while my sister threw her head back and laughed. My dad and Granny both stared at me with their fists clenched. But the meal was so good that they were soon distracted and everything was fine again. Or so I thought, because just 10 minutes later, Millie said something that changed the energy of the whole room. "You know, this whole time, Tyra has been stopping me from doing stuff for you, Granny. She said she's the only one who's capable out of the three of us." My idiot dad believed her straight away. I guess it was easier than accepting that we all hated his mother. Immediately, he stood up and dragged me into the bedroom upstairs, right in front of everyone. And right as he raised his arm up to strike my behind, I cried out, "She's lying. I planned this entire dinner." He froze midair. I braced myself, wondering if he was still going to hit me. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the uncertainty. Instead, he stormed out to grab Millie. I followed him downstairs, shaking. My legs felt like they might give out at any moment. My dad confronted Millie in front of everyone, demanding to know the truth. Millie immediately burst into tears, terrified. "Tyra's lying again. She always does this," she sobbed, looking at Granny for support. Her tears seemed to appear on command, like she had a faucet behind her eyes she could turn on whenever needed. "She's always trying to make me look bad." Granny jumped right in, putting her arm around Millie. "Your oldest has always been jealous of poor Millie. I've seen it for years." She shook her head sadly like she was disappointed in me. "It's that Asian blood in her. Makes her devious." The room went silent at her blatant racism. Even my dad looked uncomfortable, but he didn't correct her. My mom tried to step in. "That's not true. Tyra has been." "Stay out of this," my dad snapped at her. "This is between my daughters and me." My mom flinched at his tone but fell silent. I could see the hurt in her eyes, the familiar resignation. I couldn't believe what was happening. "Dad, I literally spent 3 days planning this. I made the shopping list. I decorated everything. I cooked all the food. I have blisters on my hands from kneading that bread." I held out my hands to show him, but he wouldn't even look. Millie cried harder. "She's just saying that because she's jealous that you like my party better than anything she's ever done." Her voice rose to a wail that seemed to pierce right through my dad's skepticism. My brother tried to speak up. "Dad, I saw Tyra cooking all day." "Enough!" My dad held up his hand. "Tyra, you're grounded indefinitely. I'm sick of your lies and your jealousy." I stood there in shock. "But I'm telling the truth." Granny clicked her tongue. "Such a troublemaker. Always has been." My dad pointed to the stairs. "Go to your room now." I looked at my mom for help, but she just gave me a helpless look. I knew she couldn't stand up to my dad when he was like this. As I headed upstairs, I heard Millie sniffling dramatically while Granny comforted her. "Poor dear, having to deal with such a sister," Granny said loud enough for me to hear. The next few days were miserable. I was confined to my room except for meals and bathroom breaks. My phone was confiscated, and I wasn't allowed to use the computer. Meanwhile, Millie was getting special treatment for being traumatized by my false accusations. She'd walk past my room humming happily, occasionally stopping to whisper, "Liar!" through the crack in the door. I overheard Granny talking to my dad in the kitchen. "I've always worried about Tyra's behavior. This jealousy isn't normal. Perhaps she needs professional help." My dad sighed. "Maybe you're right, Mom." Couldn't believe it. They were actually discussing sending me to therapy because I told the truth. The worst part was watching Millie smirk at me whenever our parents weren't looking. She was enjoying this. She had Granny as her ally, and together they were turning my dad against me. One night, my brother sneaked into my room. "I know you're telling the truth," he whispered. "Millie's been bragging to her friends about how she tricked everyone. At least someone believed me. But what could we do?" My dad was completely under Granny's spell, and Millie was learning all her manipulation tactics. I needed to find a way to expose them both before things got even worse. But with no phone, no computer, and basically under house arrest, I had no idea how I was going to do it. All I knew was that I couldn't let them win. Somehow, I had to make my dad see the truth about his precious mother and his increasingly manipulative younger daughter. After a week of being grounded, I started noticing my stuff disappear. First, it was small things. My favorite hair clip, a bracelet my mom gave me for my birthday, a few dollars from my emergency stash. I immediately suspected Millie, but without proof, there was no point in saying anything. My dad would just accuse me of making more false accusations. One afternoon, I was dusting the living room, one of the few times I was allowed out of my room, when I overheard Millie on the phone in the kitchen. She was talking in this fake sweet voice that she only used when she was up to something. "Yes, Granny, I'll get more of Mom's papers for you. Tyra's still grounded, so she can't stop me." She giggled. "Dad totally believes me about everything now." I froze, duster in hand. Then, I heard something that made my blood run cold. I know. I'll take more of Tyra's stuff and hide it in Mom's closet. Then I'll tell Dad that Mom is stealing from her own daughter. He'll be so mad. I nearly dropped the duster. They were planning to frame my mom now. This was getting way out of control. I needed to tell someone, but who would believe me? My dad was completely under their spell, and my mom was already walking on eggshells around everyone. I snuck closer to the kitchen door, trying to hear more of their plan. But just as Millie was saying something about getting rid of Mom for good, my dad walked in the front door. I quickly pretended to be dusting again. "What are you doing?" he asked, eyeing me suspiciously. "Just cleaning like you told me to," I said, trying to sound casual. He grunted and walked past me. I heard Millie quickly end her call and greet Dad with her usual fake enthusiasm. I needed to warn my mom. But how? That night, my brother Bradley snuck into my room again. He'd been my only ally through this whole nightmare. "I borrowed this from my friend Jordan," he whispered, pulling a small flip phone from his pocket. "It's old, but it works. You can use it to record Millie and Granny when they're plotting." I could have hugged him. "Bradley, you're a lifesaver. Just be careful," he warned. "If Dad catches you with this, we're both dead." The next day, Granny came over to help around the house, which really meant criticizing everything my mom did and making racist comments disguised as jokes. Dad thought it was a great idea to have her supervise my chores since I was still grounded. "Maybe Grandma can teach you some responsibility," he said, completely oblivious to how she treated me when he wasn't looking. As soon as he left for work, Granny cornered me in the laundry room. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" she hissed, her wrinkled face twisted with anger. "Always trying to turn my son against me." I kept folding clothes, trying to ignore her. The flip phone was hidden in my sock, recording everything. "Your mother is a terrible influence on you," she continued, "teaching you to be sneaky and dishonest. It's in your blood, I suppose." I bit my tongue. Getting into an argument would only make things worse. "You know, your father is finally starting to see what I've known all along," she said, leaning closer. "That you're just like your mother. Foreign, different, not really part of this family." That stung more than I wanted to admit. I'd always felt caught between two worlds, never fully belonging to either. Granny knew exactly where to hit to make it hurt the most. "Millie, now she's a proper Irish girl," Granny went on, smiling. "Now she understands family loyalty. Not like you." I finished folding the last towel and turned to leave. But Granny grabbed my arm, her bony fingers digging into my skin. "I know what you're up to," she whispered, "and it won't work. My son will always choose me over you and your mother. Remember that." She finally let go and I hurried out of the room, my heart pounding. I checked the phone later. The recording had worked perfectly, but would it be enough? It was just Granny being mean, not actual proof of her and Millie's schemes. Over the next few days, I collected more recordings. Granny telling my mom that her cooking was probably poisoned with foreign spices. Millie laughing with Granny about how they had my dad wrapped around their fingers. Small moments of cruelty and manipulation that added up to a clear pattern. But I needed something bigger, something my dad couldn't ignore. My chance came when Granny suggested a family meeting to discuss my behavioral issues. "I'm worried about Tyra," she told my dad, fake concern dripping from her voice. "Her jealousy of Millie is getting worse, and the way she treats me, no respect at all." My dad nodded solemnly. "I've noticed it too." I sat there fuming silently, the flip phone recording in my pocket. My mom tried to defend me, saying I was just going through a difficult phase, but Dad shut her down immediately. "This isn't about you, May," he snapped. My mom's face fell, and she stared at her hands in her lap. Millie, sitting next to Granny, had this smug little smile on her face. She was enjoying this, watching our family fall apart because of her lies. "I think Tyra needs professional help," Granny announced. "There's a place my friend's grandson went to. Very strict, very effective." My stomach dropped. Were they talking about sending me away to some kind of facility? "It's a bit expensive," Granny continued, "but I'd be willing to help with the cost for my son's peace of mind." My dad actually looked grateful. Thanks, Mom. I'll look into it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were planning to ship me off somewhere just because I'd exposed Millie's lies. I glanced at my brother, who looked as horrified as I felt. After the meeting, I retreated to my room and played back the recording. It was all there. Granny's manipulation, my dad's blind acceptance, Millie's quiet gloating. But would it be enough? My dad seemed so determined to believe the worst about me. The next day, I was cleaning the bathroom when I found something interesting. Millie's diary? Hidden behind the towels. I knew I shouldn't read it, but desperate times call for desperate measures. I flipped it open and hit the jackpot. Pages and pages of Millie writing about how she and Granny were working together to get rid of Mom and teach Tyra a lesson. She even detailed how she'd stolen my things and planted some of them in Mom's closet. I quickly took photos of the most damning pages using the flip phone. This was exactly what I needed. Proof in Millie's own handwriting. I carefully put the diary back exactly where I found it and finished cleaning. That night, I showed Bradley the photos and the recordings I'd collected. "This is crazy," he whispered, scrolling through the evidence. "Millie's completely lost it, and Granny is just encouraging her." "I need to show Dad," I said. "But he'll never believe me unless he sees it with his own eyes." Bradley thought for a moment. What if we set a trap? Get them to reveal their true colors when Dad's around. It was risky, but what choice did I have? We came up with a plan. Bradley would tell Dad he needed help with something in the garage at exactly 7 p.m. tomorrow. Meanwhile, I would confront Millie about her diary, recording the whole thing. If all went well, Dad would overhear everything. The next day dragged by slowly. I kept checking the time, nervous about our plan. What if it backfired? What if Dad still didn't believe me? I could end up in an even worse situation. Finally, 6:55 p.m. arrived. I positioned myself in the living room where I knew Millie would be watching her favorite show. The flip phone was recording in my pocket. Bradley had gone to get Dad. "Hey, Millie," I said casually, sitting down next to her. "I found something interesting today." She barely looked at me. "Whatever." "Your diary," I said quietly. "I know what you and Granny are planning." That got her attention. Her head snapped toward me, eyes wide with panic before she quickly composed herself. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice trembled slightly. "Really? So, you didn't write about stealing my stuff and planting it in Mom's closet? Or about how you and Granny are trying to convince Dad to send me away?" Millie's face flushed red. "You had no right to read my private diary, and you had no right to frame me and turn Dad against me." I shot back. "Why are you doing this? What did I ever do to you?" For a second, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes, but then it vanished, replaced by cold anger. "You've always been Mom's favorite," she hissed. "Little perfect Tyra who gets all the attention. Well, now I have Granny, and soon Dad will love me more too." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "This is about attention? You're destroying our family because you're jealous." Millie laughed. A harsh sound, nothing like her normal laugh. "Granny says Mom never belonged in this family anyway. She's just using Dad to stay in America." I was so shocked I couldn't speak for a moment. "That's the most raucous thing I've ever heard. Mom loves Dad. She loves all of us." "Whatever." Millie rolled her eyes. "Once you're sent away to that special school Granny found, things will be better around here. Dad's already filling out the application." My blood ran cold. So, they really were planning to send me away. I needed to push harder. Get her to reveal more. "And what about all the stuff you stole from me? My bracelet from Mom. My money." Millie smirked. "Some of it's in Mom's closet. The rest I gave to Granny to sell. She says, Asian junk can fetch good money from the right buyers." I was about to respond when I heard a noise behind me. I turned to see my dad standing in the doorway, his face pale with shock. Bradley stood behind him, giving me a subtle thumbs up. "Dad!" Millie jumped up instantly, switching to her innocent act. "Tyra's harassing me again. She's making up lies about me and Granny." But for once, my dad didn't immediately take her side. I heard what you said, Millie. About the stealing, about sending your sister away. Millie's eyes darted around the room looking for an escape. I was just joking. Tyra made me say those things. She's always manipulating everyone. Give me your phone, Dad said, his voice unnervingly calm. What? Why? Millie clutched her phone to her chest. Now, Millie. Reluctantly, she handed it over. Dad started scrolling through it, his expression growing darker by the minute. I realized he must be finding the texts between her and Granny. My father stared at the phone screen as if he were seeing a ghost. Trembling fingers, wide eyes, rapid breathing. Bradley and I stood still, watching in silence as he read each message exchanged between Millie and our grandmother. And with each line, the shame on his face transformed into something darker. Anger. But not that anger he had always poured on me. It was a cold, contained anger that I had never seen in him before. Millie tried to keep up the act. You don't understand, Dad. She invaded my diary. That's illegal or something. Emotional abuse. But her voice no longer had firmness. The theater was crumbling. Emotional abuse, he murmured, still looking at the phone. You and your grandmother spent weeks conspiring against your mother and your sister. You stole. You lied. You made up stories. You tried to turn one daughter against the other. You made your mother cry, Millie. You made Tyra doubt herself. And you let your grandmother call your mother a foreign invader. And you thought that was funny. Millie was trembling now. She tried to cry. But the side effect of living a life of lies is that eventually, no one believes you when you fake pain. It was Grandma. She taught me everything. I just wanted to be part of the family. My father finally looked up. And you thought that meant you had to destroy your sister? The silence was suffocating. Grandmother, who hadn't appeared in the room until then, emerged from the hallway. And for a second I thought she would deny everything, but no. She just let out a long sigh and said with a little smile, You're not going to kick me out, are you, dear? After everything I've done for you. He stared at her as if he finally saw what everyone else had seen for years. Everything you did for me? You destroyed my home. You poisoned my daughter. You tried to turn me into a blind monster just like you. She tried to smile. Dear. Shut up, Mom. Those words fell like a hammer blow. I had never heard my father say that to her. Never. Not when she mocked my mother. Not when she invaded the house. Not when she spread poison among us. He took the phone and the diary photos. He left the room for a second. I thought he was going to breathe, cool his head, but he came back minutes later with a suitcase in his hands. You're leaving today, Mom. And Millie, you too. You can pack your things. And don't you dare hide anything. I'll turn the whole house upside down if I have to. Grandmother's eyes widened. You can't do this. I'm your mother. And I'm a father. A terrible father, I admit, but not anymore. Not after this. Millie screamed. Dad, are you crazy? What if it rains? You're going to throw me out on the street. He looked at her with the coldness of someone who had finally woken up. You threw your sister into an invisible prison for weeks, and you slept peacefully. What kind of daughter does that? She ran to the stairs screaming for help. But my mother appeared and said for the first time with firmness, You will not scream in this house anymore. Grandmother tried to push my mother aside, but Bradley held her arm firmly. Don't touch my mother, he said, serious as never before. In less than an hour, both were out. Literally. Grandmother screaming in the yard. Millie sobbing with her phone confiscated. My father locked the door. For the first time, the house was silent. But inside, I was in pieces. Even after justice, exposure, revenge, the end, the pain remained. Because what they did to me wasn't just lies. It was abandonment. It was racism. It was injustice. And it hurt. Still hurt. At dinner that night, no one spoke for a while until my father broke the silence. I'm sorry. My mother lowered her eyes. Bradley just pushed food around his plate. And I wanted to say I accepted it, but I couldn't. He continued. I was weak, blind, and arrogant. And you, Tyra, were stronger than all of us combined. That phrase hit me harder than any punishment he had ever given me. For the first time, he saw me, as I had always been. But forgiveness isn't automatic. And trauma doesn't disappear with an apology. I needed more. And maybe I would have to seek it myself in my own way. The days that followed were strange. The house, which before seemed like a silent battlefield, now seemed like an abandoned minefield. The silence I had so desired now bothered me. Every corner of the house seemed to echo memories of injustice. Of the day I was dragged to my room like a criminal, of the door slamming behind me, of Millie's laughter outside. They were gone, yes, but the damage remained. In the first week, my father tried to compensate. He brought my favorite ice cream, bought flowers for my mother, helped Bradley with school homework. As if a bouquet and a chocolate bar could erase everything he had allowed. As if he hadn't called me a liar, locked me in my room, threatened to send me away. As if he hadn't stayed silent while his own mother said that my Asian blood made me dishonest. And my mother still walked as if stepping on glass. The difference was that now she no longer lowered her eyes. She began to respond, to make purposeful silence when he tried to talk. It was a subtle punishment, but it hurt him. I could see it. But what really irritated me was the fact that Millie was living normally. Yes, she and Grandma were out of our house, but they were together and, worse, free, without punishment, without shame. Millie continued going to school as if nothing had happened. I saw social media through Bradley's phone. New photos, her smiling with Grandma in the yard of great-grandmother's old house. Dancing videos as if she were on vacation and not exiled. Me blocked from everything. Her receiving messages of how beautiful, and you're so perfect. And the worst of all, your sister is strange, always was. You're the favorite. That phrase burned me inside. I wanted justice. But more than that, I wanted her to feel what I felt. The isolation, the desperation, others' doubt about your sanity. I wanted Millie to feel fear. And for that, I needed to be strategic, cold, like she was. Bradley helped me recover some old messages she had sent to school classmates. Those where she mocked my mother and said that Grandma was going to clean the family of defects. And with the help of a friend of my mother's who worked as a counselor at school, these messages were forwarded to the school board, the same one that was already alert due to previous bullying reports made by other students. 2 days later, Millie was suspended indefinitely for discriminatory behavior and hate speech. The school also notified that she should be evaluated by a psychopedagogical team before returning. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. Seeing my mother on the phone with the school being heard and taken seriously for the first time, that was enough. My father, when he received the school notification by email, said nothing. He went to the kitchen, sat down, and stared at the sink for long minutes. "I failed you all," he said without looking at anyone. "You, Tyra, you, May, and even Bradley. I let myself be manipulated by my mother, by my youngest daughter. But the worst is that I knew. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't want to admit it because it was easier." My mother continued cooking as if he wasn't even there. I stayed silent because deep down what he said was true. And hearing the truth doesn't erase the damage, doesn't repair the trauma. But one thought consumed me. What if all this came back? Because with people like my grandmother, silence never lasts. And I was right. The following week, as I was coming back from school, I found my grandmother standing in front of our house with Millie beside her, without warning, without asking permission. As if they had never done anything, as if they still had some right to step there. "We just want to talk, dear," said Grandma with that fake tone as always. "Your father doesn't answer my calls. And Millie, well, she's devastated by all this. We're family." Millie stayed silent, arms crossed, bored expression, as if she were doing a great favor being there. "You want to talk?" I said, trying to contain my anger. "After everything you did, you think you can just knock on the door and pretend you're the victims?" My grandmother sighed. "Won't you forgive us?" "No. And I'll make sure no one else believes a single word that comes out of your mouth. And as for you, Millie," I looked directly into her eyes, "you're going to learn that every action has a consequence, and yours hasn't even begun yet." Before they could respond, I closed the gate in their faces. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, But I also knew the war wasn't over yet. Maybe it had just begun. My grandmother's words kept hammering in my head for days. Won't you forgive us? It was almost funny. She talked about forgiveness as if it were an invitation to afternoon tea, when in reality, she should be begging for mercy. But for people like her, humility is a foreign language. That encounter at the gate wasn't by chance. She knew my mother wouldn't let her in anymore. She knew my father wouldn't answer her calls. So what did she want? To provoke me? To show herself present, alive, still with power? 2 days later, the answer came. We were summoned, my mother, actually. A complaint filed by my grandmother saying she had alienated the children against their father, that she created a toxic environment of prejudice against traditional Irish family values, and more, that my mother encouraged the eldest daughter to emotionally manipulate the father to destroy family bonds. I was paralyzed. Bradley punched the wall. My mother cried silently, sitting at the kitchen table. That was it. The old woman couldn't accept losing. And now she tried to use the system, like so many people like her do, to play victim, to punish us for defending ourselves. But this time I was ready. I wasn't going to let my mother fall again because of that rotten woman. And I already had everything I needed. The recordings, the photos of Millie's diary, the message screenshots, the school reports. I just needed to tie it all together into something undeniable. My father, to my surprise, took action. I'm going to testify in favor of May. My mother looked up, surprised. I let this house be corroded, but I won't allow the woman who took care of my children to suffer at my mother's hands. Not anymore. I didn't trust him 100%, but I let it go. If he really wanted to make amends, this was the moment. On the day of the hearing, my grandmother went dressed in beige with her hair done and the expression of a suffering saint. She brought Millie, who walked with the same look as always. Empty, superior, without a trace of remorse. But this time it wasn't just my word against theirs. It was everything. The recordings were presented, the screenshots shown. The school sent a written statement about Millie's suspension. And my father, with a trembling voice, admitted in front of everyone that he had let himself be manipulated and that my mother, far from being the cause of the conflict, had been the only thing that kept the house standing during all of that. The judge read the documents, listened to the audios, and looked at my grandmother for long seconds. Are you aware that the content of these recordings includes not only racial insults, but also encouragement for a minor to lie, steal, and sabotage members of her own family? She swallowed hard but tried to maintain composure. I'm an elderly woman. All I did was try to preserve the family's morals. You tried to destroy your own daughter-in-law and granddaughter. That's not moral. That's psychological abuse and racism disguised as tradition. Millie tried to defend Grandma. She cried, said she was confused, that everything was a misunderstanding. But the more she spoke, the more tangled she got. In the end, the truth was clear. The judge dismissed the complaint, formally reprimanded my grandmother for bad faith litigation, and determined that she should maintain a minimum distance of 300 m from our house and school. Millie was also included in the order for complicity and repeated manipulation. My father left silent, but my mother, she cried. For the first time in years, she cried with relief. And me, I took a deep breath. It wasn't happiness I felt. It was something stronger, peace. An angry, tired, but liberating peace. In the following months, my mother returned to work at the office she had abandoned years ago. Bradley joined the school debate team and I started therapy because yes, I was strong, but I was also broken. Being called a liar, a manipulator, not part of the family because of my origin. All of this left marks. But now, at least I wasn't alone trying to fix things anymore. Millie changed schools. Grandma disappeared for a while. Sometimes rumors surface that they tried to move to another city. It doesn't matter. What matters is that they no longer have power here and that I survived. I looked in the mirror the other day and saw a small scar on my arm, probably from when Grandma grabbed me forcefully in that argument in the laundry room. And instead of saddening me, I smiled, because she tried to erase who I was. But she failed. I am Tyra. I am May's daughter. And no one will ever silence me again. Now on to the next story. Story 2. I'm a 30-year-old woman, and I have a sister named Reagan who's 2 years older than me. Growing up, Reagan lived for the title of first. First to ride a bike, first to get a phone, first to wear makeup, first to have a boyfriend, first to go to college, first to move out. She made sure everyone knew about it. Even when no one asked, she'd bring it up like she was running some invisible race where only she knew the rules. When I got into the same university as her just 2 years later and for a completely different major, she didn't congratulate me. She didn't even pretend to be happy. Instead, she locked herself in her room at our parents' house the entire weekend and refused to come downstairs. I heard from a mutual friend later that Reagan said I was following her around like a shadow. I let it go. I thought maybe it was just stress, or insecurity, or typical older sibling nonsense, but it didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. When I moved out a year after graduating, I found a small, beat-up apartment 5 miles from where she lived. It was cheap and I was just starting out. She heard about it and told anyone who'd listen that I was trying to recreate her life. When I adopted a black Labrador 2 years after she got her golden retriever, she posted on Facebook something like, "Imitation really is the highest form of flattery," followed by a wink emoji. People started joking about it, but not in a funny way. More like those uncomfortable laughs you give when you don't know if someone's being serious or just mean. It became a pattern. She accused, I ignored. She mocked, I moved on. The breaking point came when I got engaged. My fiancé proposed to me on a weekend trip in the mountains. When I told Reagan in a casual phone call, there wasn't even a pause. Her first response was, "Wow, trying to beat me to the altar now." Not congratulations. Not even fake excitement. Just another jab. That was the last time I gave her a reaction. After that, I started keeping notes. Not online, not on a shared device, just a plain notebook in my dresser drawer. Every time she accused me of copying her, I'd write it down. The date, what she said, who was there, what led up to it. I didn't confront her. I didn't try to clear things up. I just stopped sharing. No more family group chats, updates, or social media posts. I stopped tagging anyone. If someone asked me what I was doing, I kept it vague, just working or same old. But behind the scenes, I was building my own life without her knowing a single thing about it. I planned a small wedding overseas. Not the kind of Instagram spectacle she would have posted about for 6 months in advance. Just a quiet ceremony in a place my husband and I loved. Only 20 people were invited. No, none of them were Reagan. My parents came, and I told them plainly not to tell her where or when it was happening. They didn't argue. Reagan found out after the wedding when she saw our mom's screensaver changed to a photo of us standing barefoot in the sand with matching flower crowns. She told our cousin I was sneaky and trying to one-up her without including her. 6 weeks after that, she got engaged to a guy she met at a New Year's party. It was so fast that even our parents were confused. But Reagan claimed they were soulmates and that they'd known from the beginning. She set the date for exactly 11 months after mine. I didn't care. I'd stopped comparing a long time ago. I had a job I loved, a husband who actually liked being around me, and a home that felt like mine. I didn't decorate it based on Pinterest boards or to impress visitors. I just filled it with things that made me feel calm. I didn't need to announce every move I made to get a reaction out of her. But Reagan wasn't done. She started telling people I was jealous of her, that I rushed into marriage just to beat her, and that I copied her down to the details. She even claimed I chose my dog's name because it sounded similar to hers. It was insane. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. At this point, I'd blocked her on everything. Phone, socials, even email. She had no access to my life at all. But somehow, she still managed to make it about herself. Then came the baby race. I found out I was pregnant a few months after our first anniversary. We told our parents privately and asked them not to share it with anyone. They respected that. Reagan found out only when I didn't show up to a family brunch because I was in the first trimester and sick nonstop. 2 weeks later, she announced her own pregnancy on her Instagram with a long caption about beating toxic people to the punch and taking back what was copied. At that point, even people who usually took her side started raising eyebrows. My aunt called my mom just to ask if Reagan was okay. But still, I said nothing. I had no interest in turning this into a contest. I just focused on getting things ready for my baby. And that's when I got the idea. If she wanted everyone to compare our lives so badly, maybe it was time they had something real to look at. No accusations, no drama, no speeches, just the truth side by side. Let them look. Let them see. Reagan noticed the silence fast. She wasn't used to not being the center of attention, especially mine. For years, she thrived on my reactions. When those stopped, she panicked. Out of nowhere, she sent me a long text talking about how we used to be close and how we should start fresh. I didn't reply. I didn't block her. She was already blocked on everything, but I also didn't open the door again. That window had been closed for a long time. A week later, I got a message from my best friend Fiona with a screenshot. It was a Pinterest board Reagan had created titled Kitchen Dreams. It was an exact copy of one I had made months ago while designing our kitchen renovation. Same layout, same tile pattern, same brass fixtures, even the brand of stove I'd circled in my private notes. I hadn't posted anything about it publicly, so there was no reason she would have seen it unless she had searched my profile when it was still public and recreated it detail by detail. I told Fiona not to say anything, just save it. We had a folder now, casually labeled Echoes, where she and a couple of close friends dropped screenshots. We didn't talk about it, we just documented. When I was about 5 months pregnant, I created a private message thread for my dad, stepmother, Fiona, and one other close friend to share a few baby updates. I didn't want to make a big deal about anything, but I sent them a picture of our nursery progress and the baby name we'd chosen. Nothing public, nothing forwarded. My stepmother responded with a heart emoji. That was the whole exchange. 3 weeks later, Reagan posted a photo of herself and her fiancé holding a chalkboard sign. We've decided. Baby coming soon. She wasn't pregnant. The caption made that clear, but she made sure to say they had just decided to try, and were so excited to start this new chapter. The timing wasn't lost on anyone. That was the moment I went fully offline. I told everyone close to me not to send her anything. No pictures, no casual mentions, no hints. If she wanted to know what I was doing, she'd have to guess, because I wasn't giving her anything else to copy. Then came my baby shower. It was a quiet gathering, just a few close friends at a little tea room near where we lived. I had ordered a maternity dress online, a soft blue wrap style with embroidered flowers near the hem. I had sent a screenshot of it to my best friend while deciding between 2 options. I never posted it, didn't even leave a review. At the next family dinner, 2 weeks after the shower, Reagan showed up wearing the exact same dress. Same fit, same floral embroidery, same shoes I had worn to the shower down to the brand. Nobody said anything directly, but I watched my dad glance at my stepmother with a confused expression. The table felt tense in a way I'd never seen before. Even Reagan's fiancé seemed uncomfortable. I didn't say a word, just helped myself to dessert, made light conversation, and left early. While I was on maternity leave, I started a small side business selling handmade nursery decorations. It was just something to keep my hands busy during the long newborn nights. I didn't announce it anywhere except to a few people in a group text. I made little things, mobiles, wall hangings, personalized name signs, and listed them on a quiet Etsy shop under a brand name I hadn't used before. 3 months in, Fiona forwarded me another Instagram post from Reagan. She had launched her own children's decor line. The product photos looked eerily similar to mine. She'd even used a website builder template that matched mine almost exactly. The product names were the same style. She followed the same packaging color scheme I'd chosen. It wasn't just similar. It was mirrored. That time, I documented everything. The website launch date, the domain registration, the original product photos from my phone with timestamps, the Etsy confirmation emails, even the raw files I'd saved while editing. Still, I didn't message her. I didn't make a post. I didn't tell anyone in the family. But the folder labeled Echoes doubled in size. My husband had kept his mouth shut about it for a long time. He wasn't the type to get involved in drama. But after the decor business situation, he sat down next to me at the kitchen table, held up his phone with Reagan's site open, and just said, "She's obsessed with you." I told him I didn't need to fight it. I just needed to keep building quietly. At the next family dinner, I brought a small photo book I had made of our baby's first month. Nothing flashy, just printed pages with captions bound in linen. I passed it to my stepmother, who immediately started flipping through it and tearing up. My dad looked at it next, then my uncle, then his wife. People cooed, smiled, and laughed at some of the captions. Reagan didn't even try to look at it. Instead, she started talking loudly about her future baby plans, how she was planning to do a monthly photo shoot with professional backdrops, how she had already booked a newborn photographer for next year, and how she was thinking about writing a baby book from the point of view of the baby itself. Nobody asked her to stop, and nobody argued, but nobody matched her energy either. They had already seen what real looked like. My daughter turned one in early spring, and we kept it simple. A picnic at a park with close friends, some family, and a few toddlers from our building. We laid out blankets, brought sandwiches, fruit, and a small homemade vanilla sheet cake I had baked the night before. I tied a soft pink ribbon in her hair and printed out a few baby photos to hang from the trees. Nothing extravagant, just warm, happy, and real. Half an hour in, Reagan showed up. No text, no call. She hadn't been invited. She walked straight up to the picnic blanket wearing a pale blush maxi dress identical in shade and cut to the one I had worn at my wedding. My husband spotted her first, blinked, then looked at me. Fiona glanced at the dress, then at Reagan, then just shook her head. No one said anything, but everyone noticed. Nobody said anything, but everyone saw it. She approached the picnic blanket with that exaggeratedly delicate walk, as if she were stepping onto an improvised runway. And for a second, even the wind seemed to stop just to not ruin the scene she had planned. The dress was practically identical to the one I wore at my wedding. Same light fabric, same discreet blush tone, same fluidity and movement. The difference was that on me it had been intimate. On Reagan it was a copy shouted out loud. She gave a forced smile. A high too embellished for someone who hadn't even been invited. My husband looked at me again, just with raised eyebrows. He didn't need to say anything. Fiona squeezed my hand discreetly, and my daughter was playing with dried leaves on the ground, completely oblivious to the theater. "What a cute place," said Reagan, looking around as if she were evaluating the setting of a catalog. I was nearby and decided to stop by. Nobody just stops by a park closed for private events with named invitations. Nobody appears by chance wearing exactly the dress you wore on one of the most important days of your life. But I didn't fall for it. I just smiled politely and said, "What a coincidence. That dress is quite special to me." She blushed for a moment and pretended she didn't understand. "Really? Oh, I bought it online. It was on sale. Super basic." I didn't respond. I went back to cutting strawberries. I continued preparing small plates for the children. She stood there looking like someone waiting for a spotlight to turn on. But it didn't come. Nobody invited her to sit. Nobody moved. The silence wasn't uncomfortable for me, but for her, it was unbearable. "Well, I brought a little present," she said, taking a bag that even matched the dress. Inside was a teddy bear with my daughter's name written wrong on purpose. "How kind," I replied, picking up the bear with my fingertips and discreetly setting it aside. "She's so beautiful," Reagan said, crouching down to my daughter's height. "It's going to be hard for her not to copy Mommy, right?" The provocation came as a whisper laced with venom. "I hope she'll be free," I replied, looking into her eyes for the first time. There, for the first time, she blinked before I did. And then I understood. She hadn't come to see my daughter, nor to celebrate anything. She came to invade, mark territory, and remind me that she was still watching, that she was still trying to compete for something I no longer even disputed. At that moment, as I watched her smiling forcefully, trying to make conversation with people who politely diverted with visible discomfort, something inside me clicked into place. I had spent years thinking that ignoring was enough, that I just had to close the curtains of my life and that was it. She would stop looking through the window. But Reagan wasn't just a competitive sister. She was someone who lived in the shadow of her own delusions. And the more silence I made, the more desperate she became for control. But now it wasn't just about me anymore. Now I had a daughter, and I refused to let my daughter grow up surrounded by this kind of energy. I stood up calmly. I went to my husband. I whispered in his ear, Can we end earlier? He didn't hesitate. Of course. Now. We did it as if it were part of the plan. We started packing things up. The party was almost over anyway, but everyone understood. The conversations ended naturally. The guests said goodbye, leaving sincere kisses and hugs. Fiona came up to me and murmured, "Want me to say something to her?" "No, she'll understand on her own." "Or not. But I don't take care of that anymore." With my daughter in my arms and my heart firm, I left the park without drama, without a scene, but with the absolute certainty that this would be the last time Reagan would cross a line without a response. This time it wouldn't be just silence anymore. Now it would be distance and protection. The party ended early, but what really ended that day was my patience. For years, I prided myself on my self-control, on silence, on letting Reagan shout alone, compete alone, and run alone on the track she herself invented. I thought that put me above the game. But that night, as I bathed my daughter and untangled the fine strands of her hair, I realized it wasn't about me anymore. She couldn't yet speak in complete sentences, but she already understood when something was strange. She already noticed the sideways glances and the uncomfortable presences. She deserved to grow up free, and that included being free from the shadow of someone who never accepted seeing me happy on my own. The next day, I sat with my husband and for the first time said out loud what I had been avoiding for a long time. I'm not going to ignore it anymore. I'm going to protect what we have with whatever is necessary. I started with the basics. I changed old passwords, deleted accounts that were still public, and reviewed who had access to my personal email and my old number. I created a new group with only 5 trusted contacts, all informed. Nothing involving my life can leak to Reagan. No photo, no phrase, not even a mention. Fiona helped me with everything. We created a new shared drive to store images of my daughter. Only those who knew why all this was happening had access. But what really disarmed me was what we discovered days later. Reagan had done a photo shoot alone with a fake belly. Yes, a fake pregnant belly. The photos were posted with ambiguous captions like, "The wait may be long, but love is immediate," complete with hashtags like #girlmom and #Arnwapter. No, she wasn't pregnant. She wasn't even trying anymore. She was imitating a pregnancy. Fiona sent me the images in the middle of the night. I was already asleep. I woke up with the notification, and I confess that for a second, I just stared at the screen trying to understand if it was real. It was. And at that moment, I knew that what I was facing wasn't just sister rivalry. It was obsession. Something that can't be fixed with empathy or silence. Something that needs limits, firmness, and real distance. The next morning, I went to my parents' house. I asked to talk, just the 3 of us. I looked them in the eyes and said with all the calm I could gather, "Either you respect my boundaries, or you won't participate in my life anymore." My mother cried. My father tried to justify. They talked about the love between sisters, the phases, and how Reagan always had this difficult temperament. But I wasn't there to hear explanations. I was there to establish a boundary. She invaded your granddaughter's birthday with a wedding dress. She took fake pregnancy photos without being pregnant. This isn't sister stuff anymore. This is unbalanced. And if I don't put an end to this now, the next to suffer will be my daughter. My father went silent. My mother, still crying, just nodded. I'm not asking you to cut ties with her, but if she asks something about me, about my daughter, about where we are or what we do, you have 2 options. Lie or refuse to answer. Any other attitude will force me to distance myself from you, too. For the first time, I felt they heard me not as a daughter, but as a woman, as a mother, and as someone who, after years of patience, finally decided to put herself first. I left their house feeling lighter, not because the problem was solved, but because for the first time it was named and delimited. And from there, everything would change. Not for Reagan, but for me. After that conversation with my parents, I spent days with a strange calmness. That calm that comes not when everything is resolved, but when you finally stop pretending you don't see the problem. I knew Reagan wouldn't stop. People like her don't accept limits, especially ones they didn't impose. But now, for the first time, I was prepared and she wasn't. The first attempt was subtle. I was at the cafe where I usually work on lighter days. Quiet environment, small tables on the sidewalk, the sound of dishes mixed with the sound of leaves swaying. I had already warned the few friends who used the same space. If she appears, don't talk to me. Don't give her an opening. The order now was to protect, not react. And there she was. She entered with the same theatrically soft steps, bag hanging on the side, hair done as if she were going to a TV interview. She sat 3 tables behind, ordered something just to be part of it, and kept watching me. Discreetly, of course, but I know the way. I didn't get up, didn't speak, and didn't look. I continued typing as if she were just another shadow on that sunny morning. She stayed there for 23 minutes. Then she left. Fiona, who was 2 tables away, sent just one message. First attempt documented. 2 days later, she appeared at a craft fair. I had a small stand selling pieces from my business, the one she tried to blatantly copy with the same website template, the same packaging, and even the names of the products. She didn't talk to me, didn't buy anything, but she kept walking through the parallel corridors, always stopping within sight of my stand with a clipboard, taking photos with her phone in a casual way. My husband, who was with me, approached, held my hand, and murmured, "If she steps inside the stand, I'll break composure." She won't. She just wants to be noticed. And once again, I didn't give her that. We took photos with real customers and handed out cards. Fiona, from the other side of the pavilion, photographed her with time, date, and face. Complete record. After that, she tried the indirect route. A message delivered by a cousin. She asked if she could see you to talk. I said no. A message delivered by an ex-friend. Reagan wants to apologize, but she's ashamed. She said she just needs one chance. I replied that she had 30 years. Gradually, people began to notice not just her discomfort with my silence, but the imbalance. "Did you see what she posted yesterday?" a college colleague asked me. No. A video with the caption, "Silence is also a form of violence. Think it was for you." I don't know. I don't care. Another friend commented, "Funny how she's always talking about her envious sister and never shows a picture of you 2 together. It seems the envious sister only exists in her head." And gradually the audience emptied. The jokes lost their humor. The posts became noise. The indirect comments no longer had an echo. Because for a spectacle to exist, you need an audience, and Reagan, for the first time, was acting alone on stage, without an audience, without applause, just with her own obsession echoing off the empty walls. And me? I watched it all with a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness seeing what she had become. Relief knowing that I had finally left the game. It wasn't escape. It was clarity. And with each new step she took trying to force her presence in my life, I understood more. The problem was never me imitating Reagan. The problem was always that she didn't know how to be someone without imitating me. Sometimes the recognition we expect for years comes from where we least expect it. And when it arrives, it doesn't bring euphoria nor revenge. It brings a different kind of silence, a silence of relief. It happened at a Sunday lunch, one of those family gatherings I used to avoid, but which I decided to attend after much insistence from my stepmother. Reagan, according to my mother, wouldn't come because she was emotionally tired. The old excuse she always used when she wanted attention without effort. I went not out of curiosity, but because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of her presence or absence. I was whole. I arrived with my daughter in my arms, my husband by my side, and a simple orange cake in my hand. No production, no announcement, no performance. It was only when my uncle approached, pulled up a chair beside me, and said quietly, "Can I tell you something?" that I felt something was different. He placed his interlaced hands on the table and, without beating around the bush, said, "I never realized how hard Reagan was on you. But now we understand." I stayed quiet, waiting. We laughed at the things she said. Thought it was exaggeration, sister's mischief. But seeing everything that happened, everything she's been doing, it's as if someone had removed a blindfold from our eyes. He paused. She copies you, stalks you, and still tries to invert everything to seem like the victim. I feel terrible for not having seen it before. I nodded but didn't respond immediately, because it wasn't the first time someone had told me this in recent weeks. A cousin sent me a message after seeing Reagan's fake pregnancy photoshoot. A colleague of my father's commented that he found the whole situation disturbing. And even my grandmother at breakfast the day before looked at me with teary eyes and murmured, "What she does to you, it's not from God, my child." But hearing that face-to-face at that simple lunch caught me off guard. Because for so many years, all I wanted was to be believed, to be defended, to be seen. And now that I was finally being seen, I just felt tired. Not grateful, not vindicated, just exhausted. "Thank you for saying that," I murmured to my uncle. "Really? But I don't want my life to be a response to what she does anymore. Not for better, not for worse." He nodded with a guilty look and then said, "You're right. And no matter how much she still tries, we see who you are, and that changes everything." I smiled. A smile without teeth but sincere. After lunch, I went to the backyard, sat in the hammock with my daughter sleeping on my chest, and watched the trees swaying slowly. And for the first time, I thought out loud, why do I still let this hurt? The answer came on its own. Because even when freeing yourself, some wounds take time to heal. It was no longer about Reagan being in my life. She wasn't anymore. But the damage from years of being disbelieved, ridiculed, and mocked doesn't disappear just because people understood. I still find myself doubting myself when I like the same colors she liked. I still hesitate before buying something that might remind me of an idea she already used. I still feel tainted when someone compliments something that somehow might seem similar to her style. And that's what hurts the most, because it's not enough to cut the bond. The chain still leaves a mark on the wrist. And if we don't take care, it becomes guilt that doesn't belong to us. But there, with my daughter breathing deeply in my lap, with the smell of grass and cake in the air, I decided I will heal. Not to prove anything, but so my daughter never grows up thinking that loving someone means chasing approval. From then on, I started writing again. Not in a hidden notebook like before, but for myself, for my story, to give back to myself the parts that Reagan tried to swallow. And when I got up from that hammock, I knew the next step wasn't to distance Reagan. The next step was to get closer to myself. My daughter was almost 2 years old when she pointed to an old photo and asked in that curious and innocent way that only a child has, "Mommy, who's that lady from the strange party?" The photo was one of the few that remained of me still pregnant. I was smiling, wearing that light blue dress, surrounded by friends at my baby shower. And there, in a corner of the image, barely framed, appeared Reagan. Face turned to the side, harsh expression, and the same dress, copied, sewn with provocation. I swallowed hard. I looked at my daughter and, for the first time, allowed myself to answer without bitterness. That lady was someone who wanted very much to appear in the photos, even when the party wasn't hers. She widened her little eyes, confused. "Why?" I smiled calmly. "Because sometimes, sweetie, there are people who haven't yet learned to shine on their own. And when that happens, they try to take others' shine as if it were theirs. Like taking a toy without asking?" Exactly like that. She thought for a second, then changed the subject as only children can. But I stayed there, holding the image in my hands, thinking about how many versions of the story I carried in silence. How many times I preferred to disappear from photos just to avoid confrontation. How many times I gave up speaking to not seem bitter, to not be the sister who complains. But my daughter was growing up, and with her, my responsibility grew not to pass on what I had swallowed my entire life. The legacy I wanted to leave her wasn't made of beautiful dresses or walls decorated with good taste. It was made of examples, of dignity, of boundaries, and of truth. The following week, I set aside time for myself. I took everything that was in that folder called Echoes, the screenshots, the prints, the records, and I deleted them one by one without anger, without rush. Not because I had forgotten what she did, but because I was no longer that person. Reagan stayed in the past, stuck in her repetitions, in the cycle she created and never managed to break. I did not. I was creating something new, my own line, my own rituals, my rhythm, my peace. And now, when my daughter calls me to play, when she chooses her own clothes, when she shows me the drawing made just by her, I don't just see a child. I see freedom. Freedom that I needed to conquer with silence, pain, and firmness. And I know she will grow up hearing, "You can be whoever you want. You don't need to compete with anyone. You're not here to please those who want to be you. You're here to be happy in your own way." In the end, Reagan tried to erase me by copying everything I did. But what she never understood is that my strength was never in things, nor in events, nor in clothes, nor in photos. My strength was always in not needing anyone's approval to exist. And now, every time I look at my daughter running barefoot in the yard with her hair tied in the crooked way she did herself, I know I broke the cycle. And if there's one thing I leave for her as inheritance, it's this: the freedom to not live as anyone's shadow. Now on to the next story. Story 3. I'm an adult entertainment worker, and I recently had an experience with a client that made me feel sorry for his wife. I had been working in adult entertainment since I was very young. I started at 18, and now I was around 30, well preserved. I had experienced a lot with clients, made a lot of money, and enjoyed this life. I had never considered leaving it because I saw what men were capable of, especially with their wives. I'm not generalizing. Not all men are like this, but I had witnessed many things. Before I turned 18, I had a romantic disappointment that led me to change my life, marking a turning point for me. I decided to follow this path, telling myself I would be fine using men and making money from it, and that's what I did. It was a life I liked and didn't regret until the day a client started coming to the place where I worked every night. The man had a lot of money and had become attached to me over time. He started spending night after night with me. He always booked 2 hours every evening. After about 6 months of daily visits, he got my contact information and started being more informal when he came to my place. He gave me gifts, showered me with little attentions, and I enjoyed it a lot. Like him, I had other clients who did the same. Until the day he scheduled an appointment with me. I thought he would come to my place as usual, but to my surprise, he insisted on meeting at the place where I worked. Seemed fine to me. He booked a 5-hour appointment with me, which seemed very strange because, although he visited the place daily, he never stayed more than 2 hours and was always very punctual. He was an older man, and by that time he had been coming to see me for about a year and a half. In a way, we were involved, but I wouldn't say it was a relationship. It was something more casual, without involving feelings. Just like I had other clients, I had him, and he never talked about emotions. Everything was about the money. He had booked a 5-hour appointment and was even going to pay more. When I asked him why, given that we had some trust, he said he would explain when he arrived. I got ready and went to the place where he had booked those 5 hours, essentially renting out all my working time. At that point, I didn't need the money as much, so I had reduced my hours. When I arrived, he asked me to wait in the room. I was already there, all dressed up as he liked. I had even chosen lingerie in the color he had requested. He arrived with a young girl who seemed to be in her 20s, with such a youthful face that I thought she was 15. So much so that when he came in, he quickly said, "Don't worry, she's 20. I looked at her, not understanding. I thought he wanted something between the three of us, which wasn't rare for me. I had done that several times before. I asked him why he had told me earlier, but the girl came in with a very shy attitude. She seemed extremely frightened, looking at me with big eyes. She was wearing a wedding ring, meaning she was married. I was sitting on the bed, not understanding anything, and she was completely lost. He gently pushed her to sit on the bed while he settled into an armchair, pulled out a pack of cigarettes, and started smoking as he usually did. Then he began to speak. He calmly lit the cigarette, taking his time, as the smoke began to fill the room. The girl couldn't stop looking at me, her expression a mix of panic and shame. The atmosphere was dense, and I felt a tension I wasn't used to in my work. He comfortably seated in the armchair, crossed his legs, and with a cold smile on his face, began to speak. "This is my wife. We've been married for just over a year. You might be wondering why I brought her here, and I'll explain. She found out about you. Of course, I was never discreet, and to be honest, I never cared what she thought. But the thing is, she's religious and doesn't accept the idea of divorce. So I thought of something more entertaining, something that could solve our problem once and for all. He took a deep drag from his cigarette and looked at his wife, who was huddled on the bed, visibly uncomfortable. I felt a shiver run down my spine, unsure of where he was going with this. He continued as if he were recounting the most casual story in the world. My dear wife here has always been a very submissive woman, never complained about anything until now. She found out about us and had the audacity to confront me, to threaten to leave. Imagine that, her, the obedient little girl, daring to oppose me. He laughed, a dry, cold laugh that seemed to cut through the air. So, after a few weeks of reflection, I realized there was a more interesting solution. I decided she needed to learn a lesson, and who better to teach her than you? I blinked, unable to believe what I was hearing. My heart started to race, a mix of anger and confusion growing inside me. Teach her a lesson? What are you talking about? I asked, trying to stay calm but already knowing something horrific was about to happen. He looked at me with that malevolent smile on his face and said, I want you to do to her what you do to me, but not just that. I want you to humiliate her, to make her feel what it's like to be used, discarded. I want her to understand that, in the end, she has no control over anything, neither over me nor over her own life. I want her to see what I do every night with you and know that this is how things will be from now on. And if she resists... He paused, his gaze turning even darker. I've made arrangements for this little secret of ours to be known by everyone she knows. Family, friends. She will be destroyed. At that moment, I didn't know if I felt disgust, anger, or a mixture of both. The girl on the bed was in shock, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't say a word. I stood up slowly, trying to process what he had just said. Do you really think I'm going to do this? That I'll be part of this monstrosity? He shrugged with a smug smile. You do this every day, dear. What's the difference now? The difference, I thought, was that I had never been part of something so twisted before. This man, whom I had seen as just another client, had revealed his true face, a cruel manipulator willing to destroy his own wife for sheer sadistic pleasure. I looked at the young woman sitting on the bed, trembling with fear, and something inside me snapped. Did I hate what I did? No. I had always known what I was involved in, had always been honest with myself about the men who came in and out of my life, but this was different. This man wanted me to become something I never wanted to be, an instrument of his cruelty. No, I said firmly. I'm not going to do this. He looked at me with an expression of disbelief, as if he had never imagined someone could challenge him. You're joking, right? I pay you. I pay very well, actually. And now, when I finally ask for something that really matters, you refuse. I stepped forward, feeling the anger rise within me. I am not your tool. You want to destroy your wife? Do it yourself. But I will not participate. He stood up slowly, throwing the cigarette on the ground and crushing it with his foot. The look on his face changed from amused to something much more threatening. You're making a big mistake. A mistake that will cost you dearly. I knew he was serious. The kind of men I worked with didn't take challenges easily. But at that moment, something inside me broke. I could no longer ignore what he was, what he represented. Get out of here, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. And take your wife with you. He stood there for a few seconds, staring at me as if deciding what to do. Then, without a word, he turned to the young woman on the bed and pulled her by the arm, dragging her out of the room. She looked at me one last time with a look I would never forget, a mix of gratitude and despair. As the door closed behind them, I felt a wave of relief mixed with deep anger. That was the day I realized that no matter how much I thought I had control over my life, there were limits. There were things I would never be willing to do, even for money. And at that moment, I knew my life was about to change. I could no longer continue in that world, knowing what could happen. After that day, no matter how hard I tried to move on, I couldn't get that scene out of my head. The image of that young woman, so terrified and so lost, haunted me. I knew it wasn't my responsibility, knew that what she was going through with that man was beyond my control, but something within me wouldn't let me simply ignore it. Maybe it was the fact that I had also suffered a major heartbreak before entering this world. Or perhaps it was the sheer and simple empathy I couldn't suppress. I knew from the moment he left dragging that woman that she wasn't just trapped in an unhappy marriage. She was under the control of a cruel man. And as a witness to that abuse, I couldn't simply pretend nothing had happened. I began to search for them discreetly. I knew where he lived and worked, and through some contacts, I learned that she hardly ever left the house. Every time I remembered the look of desperation in her eyes, something gnawed at me from within. I started looking for ways to help. First, I tried to approach her discreetly in public places. I saw her several times in a supermarket or a pharmacy, always with that empty look, always downcast. But when I tried to get closer, she would flee. It was as if she feared any contact. Deep down, I knew she was trapped in a cycle of abuse, a cycle that was hard to escape. And the more she ran, the more compelled I felt to do something. The situation reached a point where I couldn't focus on my work anymore. I stopped accepting clients for weeks, and my mind was fixed on finding a way to help that woman, even if she didn't know or, worse, didn't want it. I decided I needed evidence of the abuse. I knew that her testimony alone wouldn't be enough, and she would never speak out on her own. The only way to take that man down was with solid evidence. That's when I started investigating more thoroughly. I discovered through some connections that he was violent, not just at home but also in shady business dealings. He had several accounts moving money in suspicious ways, which gave me an edge in tracking his movements. I managed to discreetly install a hidden camera in a place where he frequently met with other men to discuss shady matters. But that wasn't enough. I needed proof of physical abuse. One night, after weeks of observation, the opportunity arose. He came home drunk, shouting at her right at the door. I decided that this was the moment. I could no longer wait. I called the police, reporting the assault. Meanwhile, I filmed everything from a distance through the window with a discreet camera. Every word he said, every insult, and finally, the moment he raised his hand and struck her hard. My heart raced, but at the same time I knew I was doing the right thing. The police arrived within minutes, and he was taken away. I was called to testify as a witness, and the footage I recorded was more than enough to ensure his conviction. At that moment, I thought I had finally done something good, that the woman who had suffered so much at his hands would finally be free. I felt relieved, as if I had achieved justice. However, my illusion that she would be grateful was quickly shattered. A few days later, I went to find her to see how she was doing. I thought it would be a meeting full of relief, that she would understand the sacrifice I had made and how much I had tried to help her. However, as soon as she saw me, her expression changed from fear to something much darker. "You destroyed my life," she told me, her eyes filled with fury. "You did this on purpose. I know what you want." I was in shock, not understanding what was happening. "I just wanted to help you," I said, trying to calm the situation. "He was hurting you. I couldn't let it continue." She approached me with eyes full of hatred. "I didn't ask for your help. He's my husband, and now you've taken him away from me. You did this because you want him all to yourself. I thought you were just another prostitute, but now I know you want to steal the man I love." I tried to argue, explain that it wasn't like that the man was destroying her, but she didn't want to listen. She started insulting me, humiliating me, throwing in my face the fact that I worked as an escort. "Do you think you're better than me just because you make easy money? I know how you seduced him, how you manipulated him. You want my place, but you'll never be more than a cheap woman. He will never love you like he loves me." Her words cut deep. I knew she was in denial, trapped in a toxic cycle, but still, the ferocity with which she attacked me left me paralyzed. The woman I had tried to save was blaming me, hating me, and more than that, she was willing to endure any abuse just to not lose the man who was abusing her. I stood there speechless as she continued to scream, tears streaming down her face. Finally, she turned and walked away, leaving me alone, stunned. I didn't expect thanks, but I never thought I'd be blamed for saving someone from a monster. That day, I learned a bitter lesson. No matter how much you want to help someone, not everyone is ready to be saved. Some people, no matter how much they are suffering, prefer their chains to freedom. Weeks passed since that tumultuous day, and to my surprise, or perhaps not so much, he was released. I learned through contacts that the wife hadn't filed a police report or followed up on the case. And without her testimony, the evidence I had gathered wasn't enough to keep him in jail for long. It was as if everything I went through, everything I risked to get her out of that situation, had been in vain. I found out he had returned to his usual haunts, the same adult entertainment venues, as if nothing had happened. At first, I thought he might have changed, that maybe his time in jail had taught him a lesson. But I quickly realized he was the same man, full of arrogance, with that same coldness in his eyes. He had learned nothing. On the contrary, he seemed even more brazen, as if he were above consequences. I heard from other girls that he was becoming increasingly violent and impatient, the same stories of control and abuse. But this time, I knew it wasn't just with his wife. It was a cycle he repeated with any woman who entered his life. And even though I had escaped that specific moment, I knew it wouldn't end well for anyone involved. What surprised me was my own reaction to all of this. Before, as difficult as it was, I handled that kind of situation thinking it was just part of my job. I had always been aware of the choices I made and the environment I was in. But after everything I experienced with him, something inside me changed. I could no longer continue with that job in the same way. The image of him, his cruel gaze, the way he manipulated the lives of the women around him, made me realize I no longer wanted to be part of such a world. I had always believed I had control over my life, that I knew exactly where I was stepping, but now everything seemed different. It was no longer just about money or survival. It was about dignity, about knowing the limits of what I was willing to endure. Every time I remembered how I was involved in that monstrosity, I felt further from the person I used to be. So, after much reflection, I decided it was time to leave that world behind. It was no longer just a matter of work. It was a matter of inner peace. I couldn't continue watching men like him or women trapped like his wife destroy lives, including mine. I quit the job. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the only one that felt right at that moment. I didn't know exactly where I would go next or what I would do with my life, but at that moment, one thing was clear. I would never again let someone like him have power over me or my choices. Perhaps for many, my departure won't make a difference. Perhaps he'll continue the cycle, returning to the same places, finding other victims to fuel his cruelty. But for me, it was over. And in a way, feeling that I was leaving it behind was the only victory I could take from this whole story. And so, once again, life moved on. But this time, it moved on without the shadows of that man and with the hope of a new beginning. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My name is Ryan and I'm 33 years old. I still remember the exact sound of the lock turning on my 18th birthday, as if someone had closed not just a door, but an entire chapter of my life. My parents stood inside the house, arms crossed, while I stood outside with nothing but a duffel bag of clothes and a set of car keys. My mom said flatly, "You're an adult now. You're on your own." My dad added, almost like it was a punchline to a joke, "Consider it a lesson in life." Then the door shut. The lights inside flickered off. I was left staring at my own reflection in the darkened window of the home I'd grown up in. The home that suddenly wasn't mine anymore. I tried to laugh it off at first, convincing myself that maybe they were bluffing, that it was some twisted test of independence. But when I came back the next morning, knocking on the door with a mixture of hope and anger, no one answered. The locks had been changed. The garage door code didn't work anymore. My phone buzzed with a single text from my mother. "We told you good luck." That was it. No explanation, no guidance, no safety net. Just a void where my family used to be. I spent the next month sleeping in the back seat of my beat-up car. It wasn't much, just an old sedan that rattled every time I turned the key, but it was the only shelter I had. Nights were the hardest. I would lie awake, staring up through the smudged windshield at the sky, replaying every conversation I'd ever had with my parents, trying to pinpoint when I became so disposable to them. I'd ask myself if I had missed some sign, some clue that they'd been planning this. But the truth was, they had always been cold, always quick to remind me that I wasn't the golden child. That was my sister Emily, the one who followed every rule, got straight A's, and never questioned their authority. Meanwhile, I was the kid who liked drawing, who skipped football practice, who dreamed of moving to the city and doing something different. In their eyes, I was a disappointment waiting to happen. And on my 18th birthday, they decided to cut their losses. During those car-sleeping months, I cycled through every possible emotion. At first, there was anger. A raw, searing anger that made me want to storm back into the house and scream at them until they understood what they'd done. But that anger eventually collapsed into despair. I would sit in the driver's seat with the keys dangling in my hands, feeling the weight of their words pressing down on me. "You're on your own now." It wasn't just a sentence. It was a life sentence. Yet, somewhere in that darkness, I found a small ember of determination. If they thought I couldn't make it, then I had no choice but to prove them wrong. The first job I picked up was at a gas station working the overnight shift. It wasn't glamorous. I stocked shelves, cleaned bathrooms, and swept floors at 3 a.m. while the rest of the world slept. But it gave me a paycheck. I showered in the grimy employee bathroom and bought dollar burgers from the drive-thru down the road. Every night I told myself it was temporary, that if I just kept moving forward, things would change. Slowly, that ember of determination grew into something steadier. I started saving money little by little until I could rent a tiny studio apartment. It wasn't much bigger than my car, but it had 4 walls, a bed, and a door that I could lock from the inside. For the first time, I didn't feel like the world could push me out. But the distance between me and my parents wasn't just physical. It became emotional, too. I stopped calling, stopped checking if maybe they had softened. I convinced myself they didn't exist, that family was a concept I had to build from scratch on my own. I worked harder than I ever thought I could. First at that gas station, then at a diner, then finally landing a job at a construction company where I learned the ropes and proved myself. With every paycheck, with every small step forward, I could almost hear my parents' voices in the back of my mind, mocking me, doubting me. And every single time I used that memory as fuel. Now, sitting here at 33, I look around at the life I've built, the home I own, the business I've started, the circle of friends who feel more like family than my own blood ever did, and I can't help but feel both pride and disbelief. I made it. I survived what should have broken me. And yet, life has a strange sense of humor. Because just when I thought I had left the past behind, my parents showed up at my door. It was a Tuesday evening when I heard the knock. A steady, almost hesitant knock that didn't match the delivery drivers or neighbors I was used to. When I opened the door, there they were. My father looked smaller than I remembered, his shoulders hunched, his face lined with worry. My mother clutched her purse like it was the only thing tethering her to the ground. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, that some cruel twist of memory had conjured them up. But then my mother spoke, her voice trembling. "Ryan," she said, "we need your help." And that's when the old wounds I thought had healed suddenly began to ache again. I stood frozen in the doorway, the same doorway where I had greeted clients, friends, and neighbors with warmth countless times. But this wasn't the same. My father's eyes flicked around, not meeting mine, as if he was taking inventory of the house. The hardwood floors, the art on the walls, the simple but tasteful furniture I'd chosen. My mother, on the other hand, looked directly at me. She had the same sharp eyes I remembered, the same ones that used to narrow whenever she compared me to my sister. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Then she let out a sigh that was half pleading, half expectant. "Ryan, can we come in?" she asked. I hesitated, every instinct in me screaming, "No!" I thought of all those nights in my car, shivering under a thin blanket, while behind the walls of their warm house, they slept soundly without a thought for me. Still, something inside me, maybe politeness, maybe curiosity, shifted my weight to the side. "Fine," I said and stepped back. They entered like strangers, glancing around at a life they hadn't built, a life they had bet against. My dad cleared his throat. "You've done well for yourself," he muttered, like it was an accusation instead of a compliment. My mother nodded in agreement, but I could see the way her lips tightened. It wasn't pride. It was calculation. We sat down in the living room and I waited. Finally, my mother broke the silence. "It's Emily," she said. "She's going through a difficult time." There it was, the name. My sister, the golden child. I leaned back in my chair, already bracing myself. "She's had some setbacks," my mother continued. "Her husband left and she's struggling financially. She's not doing well emotionally either. We thought, well, you've done so well, Ryan. Maybe you could help her get back on her feet." I stared at them, trying to process the audacity. 15 years of silence. 15 years of pretending I didn't exist. And now here they were. Not to apologize, not to reconnect, but to ask me to bail out the daughter they had chosen over me every single time. "What exactly are you asking?" I said slowly. My father finally spoke up. His tone was firm, as if this was already decided. "We were hoping you could lend her some money, a substantial amount. Enough so she can keep her house. Maybe start over. She's your sister, after all." I laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "You locked me out on my 18th birthday, told me I was on my own, and now you want me to save Emily?" My mother frowned as if I was being unreasonable. "That was years ago. We wanted you to learn responsibility. And look, it worked. You're successful now, aren't you? We gave you the push you needed." Her words hit me like ice water. She was rewriting history right in front of me. In her version, abandoning me wasn't cruelty. It was some kind of twisted gift. I leaned forward, my hands gripping my knees. "You didn't give me a push. You left me with nothing." I slept in my car. I scrubbed gas station floors at 3 o'clock in the morning. "I built this life without you." My dad waved a hand dismissively. "The past is the past. Emily needs you now. We always knew you were stronger, that you could handle yourself. That's why we focused more on her. She was fragile. You were resilient." I could feel the old anger rising, the same anger that had kept me awake so many nights in that car. Resilient. That was their excuse. That I could handle being thrown away while Emily got every ounce of care and comfort. "And what about me?" I asked quietly. "Who was there for me when I needed help?" My mother's eyes flickered, but she didn't answer. Instead, she said, "Ryan, don't be selfish. She's your family. She needs you." The word selfish stung. Selfish after all I had endured, all I had clawed my way through. Selfish because I wasn't eager to hand over the stability I had bled for. I thought back to birthdays spent alone, to holidays where no one called, to the countless times I had been reminded I was the expendable one. And now, after all that, they dared to sit in my living room and make me feel guilty for not opening my wallet. They weren't here for me. They weren't even here because they wanted to see me. They were here because Emily, the golden child, had fallen from her pedestal, and they needed someone to prop her back up. And in their minds, who better than the son they had once tossed aside like garbage? But as my mother's voice grew sharper, as my father's eyes grew more insistent, I realized something else. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. They wanted to reestablish the same dynamic as before: me, the one who gives, who bends, who sacrifices, and Emily, the one who receives. The roles hadn't changed at all, and for the first time I wasn't sure if I wanted to play along. My father leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and lowered his voice like he was about to share something confidential. "Ryan," he said, "this isn't just about helping your sister. It's about doing what's right for the family. You've done well, and it's only fair that you share some of that with the people who raised you." I almost laughed at the word raised. Raised implied care, guidance, support. What they had done was closer to abandonment wrapped in a neat package of self-righteousness. But before I could respond, my mother reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of papers. She slid them across the coffee table toward me. "What's this?" I asked, though my chest was already tightening. "It's a loan agreement," she said smoothly. "We thought it would be easier for you to help Emily this way. We've already spoken to the bank. Well, technically we used your name since you have better credit now. The loan's been approved. All you have to do is sign." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I picked up the papers and scanned the lines. Sure enough, my name was printed neatly across the top. The bank, the terms, the repayment schedule, everything had been set up without my knowledge. My parents hadn't just come to ask for help. They had already decided to entangle me in this mess, assuming I would have no choice but to agree. My voice cracked as I asked, "You used my name?" My father nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. "We had to. Emily doesn't qualify and you're in a much better position than she is. It's really no big deal. Just sign it and she'll get the money she needs. You won't even feel it." The room tilted for a moment, my pulse thundering in my ears. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This wasn't just asking for help. This was betrayal on a level I hadn't imagined. They hadn't respected me enough to even ask first. They had gambled with my name, my reputation, my future, like it was theirs to control. "I can't believe this," I whispered. My mother's tone hardened, her mask of politeness slipping. "Ryan, stop being dramatic. We wouldn't even be here if it weren't urgent. Emily is going to lose her house. Do you really want your sister living on the streets? Is that what kind of man you've become?" I looked at her, stunned. "Do you even hear yourself? You're guilt-tripping me into signing away my life because Emily messed up hers. You didn't care when I was sleeping in my car. You didn't care when I had nothing. But suddenly, when Emily's in trouble, you're desperate. She's your sister," my father snapped, his voice rising for the first time that night. "She deserves better. She's always been the one who carried this family's name with pride. You were reckless, always running off with your little ideas and dreams. If we had to choose who to support, of course it was her. And now that you're in a position to help, you're acting like a stranger." The words cut deeper than I expected. Even after all these years, hearing him admit so plainly that I had always been the expendable one twisted something inside me. All those times I had wondered if maybe I was imagining it, if maybe I just wasn't trying hard enough to win their approval, those doubts shattered in an instant. They hadn't even seen me as worth investing in. I pushed the papers back toward them, my hands shaking. "No, I'm not signing this." My mother's face hardened. She leaned forward, her voice low but dripping with venom. "You think you're better than us now, don't you? Sitting in this nice house, pretending you built everything on your own. Don't forget where you came from, Ryan. Without us, you'd be nothing." The irony was almost laughable. Without them, I had been nothing, and that nothing had taught me to fight for everything I had now. But the betrayal sitting in front of me, the realization that even after 15 years they hadn't changed, was almost too much to take in. And then, as if twisting the knife, my mother added, "If you won't do it for Emily, think of us. We've already tied our names to this loan. If you refuse, it'll look bad for the family. Do you want us to suffer? After all we've done for you, all they'd done for me." The words echoed in my mind, heavy with bitterness. They weren't just asking for help anymore. They were threatening me with shame, with reputation, with the idea of family that they had never once extended to me. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I realized there was no going back, no reconciliation, no quiet forgiveness waiting at the end of this story. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I leaned back in my chair, my voice steady now, almost calm. "So that's it. You come into my home, you use my name without asking, you demand I take on debt for Emily, and you think I'll just roll over like before." My father's jaw tightened. My mother's eyes narrowed. The silence between us grew heavier, like a storm building just before it breaks. And that's when I knew this wasn't just about helping Emily. This was about showing them I wasn't the same broken kid they had left on the porch 15 years ago. The silence that followed my refusal was thick enough to choke on. My father's hand clenched into a fist on the armrest, his knuckles whitening. My mother leaned back, crossing her arms, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. For a moment, I wondered if they were going to shout, storm out, or even threaten something worse. But instead, my mother let out a long, tired sigh and said, "You'll regret this, Ryan. Family is everything, and when you turn your back on family, you turn your back on yourself." The words lingered in the air even after they left. They gathered their things, standing stiffly, and without another word, walked out of my house. I didn't follow them. I didn't even watch from the window. I sat in my chair long after the sound of their car had faded into the night, staring at the unsigned loan papers still lying on the table. For the first time in years, I felt like I was back in that car again. 18, alone, staring at the roof of my sedan while the cold crept into my bones. I thought I had outrun that version of myself, buried him under layers of success and independence. But now, with a few words and a stack of papers, my parents had managed to drag me right back into that old wound. The following days were heavy. I couldn't focus at work, my mind looping endlessly around what had happened. I kept asking myself questions I couldn't answer. Was I heartless for refusing? Was I selfish for not helping Emily? Was I really as cold as they claimed? Their voices played in my head like a cruel chorus. You're selfish. You'll regret this. Without us, you'd be nothing. I tried to shake it off, but the weight clung to me. Nights were the worst again. I'd sit awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling that same ache of isolation I thought I had left behind. For years, I had told myself their rejection didn't matter, that I was stronger without them. But their sudden reappearance, their demands, and that betrayal with the loan, those cracks in my armor widened faster than I expected. One morning, I found myself parked outside the old gas station where I'd worked all those years ago. I hadn't been there in a decade. The place hadn't changed much. The same faded sign, the same smell of fuel lingering in the air. I sat there in my car, gripping the steering wheel, remembering those long nights mopping floors and wondering if I'd ever make it out. It hit me then how close I had come to giving up back then. How fragile I had been beneath all that resilience my parents claimed I had. I realized that their betrayal hadn't just hurt. It had reopened scars I wasn't sure had ever fully healed. But underneath that pain, something else began to stir. A quieter voice, one that reminded me that I had survived once before and I could survive this too. I didn't have to let them define me again. I didn't have to play their game. That night, I pulled the loan papers from the coffee table and read through them carefully, line by line. The more I read, the angrier I became. They had really gone this far, used my name, my credit, my reputation without even asking. It wasn't just manipulation. It bordered on fraud. My parents weren't just asking for help. They were willing to risk destroying me to save Emily. I sat back, staring at the papers, my chest rising and falling slowly. The anger hadn't burned out yet, but it was shifting, hardening into something colder, something sharper. For the first time since that knock on my door, I started to think not about what they had done to me, but about what I could do in response. The thought scared me a little, if I'm honest. It felt dangerous, like stepping onto a path I couldn't turn back from. But it also felt necessary. If they were willing to gamble with my life for Emily's sake, then maybe it was time they finally learned what it felt like to be powerless. But I wasn't ready yet, not fully. For now, I needed space. I needed to breathe. I needed to remind myself that I wasn't that scared 18-year-old kid anymore. So I quietly folded the loan papers, slipped them into a drawer, and began to plan. The drawer with the loan papers became both a weight and a reminder. Every time I walked past it, I felt that simmering anger, but I also felt clarity. I had survived their abandonment. I had built a life from nothing, and now they had proven that nothing about them had changed. If I wanted to rise, it wasn't going to be for their approval. It was going to be for me. The weeks after their visit, I threw myself into work. I ran a contracting business by then, something I had started small but had been growing steadily for years. We specialized in renovations and custom builds. And while business had always been good, I found myself more focused, more driven than ever. Every new project, every satisfied client, every check I signed for my employees, it all became part of a bigger picture. Success, I realized, wasn't just about money. It was about control. Control over my own life, my future, and most importantly, over the narrative that my parents had tried to write for me. Opportunities began to line up in ways they never had before. A developer I had done work for introduced me to a group of investors who were looking for someone to manage a series of commercial renovations. That contract alone doubled my company's annual revenue. Suddenly, I wasn't just a small business owner. I was building something that had reach, that had weight. With the extra income, I made changes in my personal life, too. I upgraded my home, not out of vanity, but because I wanted a space that truly reflected what I had achieved. I traded in my old truck for a new one that I didn't have to pray over before every job. I even took my crew on a retreat as a thank you, watching their faces light up when they realized I valued them in a way my own parents had never valued me. Each step forward gave me more confidence, more leverage, and more distance from the boy who had once slept in his car. But it wasn't just financial growth, it was emotional growth, too. I started opening up to people in ways I hadn't before. Friends became like family, the kind that showed up not because they wanted something, but because they cared. I even began mentoring a couple of younger guys in the trade, kids who reminded me of myself at 18, written off by everyone around them. I told them the things I wish someone had told me back then. That resilience doesn't mean you deserve abandonment, and that success is never about proving someone else wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And yet, in the back of my mind, I knew my parents hadn't gone away. They had left my house empty-handed. But people like them didn't disappear quietly. They were waiting, watching, hoping I would cave, that I would eventually call and offer to help Emily. But with every new contract, every meeting with investors, every time I deposited another check into the business account, I felt stronger, more prepared. If they thought they could still pull strings on me, they were wrong. The shift became even clearer one night at a networking dinner. An investor introduced me as the man who built his business from scratch. The applause, the nods of respect, the handshake that followed. It all felt like validation I had never gotten from my parents. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. I didn't need their approval. I never had. But I also realized something else. Power wasn't just about protecting myself from them anymore. It was about positioning myself so that when they inevitably came back, and I knew they would, I'd be ready. Not as the boy who begged for scraps of affection, not as the man who quietly endured betrayal, but as someone who could finally look them in the eye and show them the cost of underestimating me. The rise wasn't just about building wealth. It was about building leverage. And deep down, I was beginning to sense that the moment to use it was getting closer. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to overhear. One afternoon, I stopped by a local supply yard to check on an order. As I was walking past the small office, I caught the tail end of a heated conversation. My mother's voice. I froze. She was standing outside, phone pressed to her ear, speaking with that sharp tone she always used when she was trying to sound in control. "No, I told you we'll get the money. My son has more than enough. It's just a matter of convincing him. Emily cannot lose that house. Do you understand? If you foreclose, it will look bad for all of us." I ducked back behind a stack of pallets, my heart pounding. It hit me that this wasn't just about helping Emily out of some rough patch. She was on the brink of losing everything. And my parents weren't just worried about her. They were worried about appearances, about the family name. I waited until she left, then stepped into the office and casually asked the clerk who the woman had been. He shrugged and said, "Some lady arguing with the bank manager. Her daughter's mortgage is underwater." Not sure why she thought yelling would change that. The pieces began to click together in my mind. My parents hadn't just wanted me to help. They needed me to. Without my involvement, Emily was going to lose her home, and with it, the image they had spent decades protecting. The pedestal they'd always placed her on was cracking. And in their desperation, they had turned to the one person they once discarded. That realization was a turning point. For years, I had carried the weight of being the expendable one. But now the roles had flipped. I wasn't the desperate one anymore. They were. Independence in the wrong hands could be dangerous. Around that same time, an opportunity fell into my lap. The developer I had been working with offered me a chance to invest in a series of properties he was acquiring. It was risky, but the potential upside was huge. I ran the numbers, looked at the projections, and realized this was the moment I had been waiting for. If I played it right, not only could I grow my business, but I could secure a position of real influence in the community. I poured everything into the deal. Late nights reviewing contracts, meetings with attorneys, careful negotiations with lenders. And when it finally closed, I found myself holding keys to properties that would generate steady income for years to come. I wasn't just running a contracting business anymore. I was becoming a landlord, an investor, a name that carried weight in circles my parents could only dream of entering. And that's when I started to think bigger. If Emily was truly at risk of losing her house, and if my parents were scrambling to maintain appearances, then there was an angle here, something I could use. But I didn't want to rush. Revenge done in anger is sloppy. Revenge done with patience is art. So I waited. I built my reputation quietly, letting word spread about my success. I attended community meetings, shook hands with city officials, even sponsored a local charity event. People began to look at me differently, not just as a contractor but as someone who mattered. One evening, while reviewing paperwork, I noticed something interesting. One of the properties I now held partial ownership in was just a few blocks away from Emily's house. It wasn't much, an older building in need of renovation, but the proximity was poetic. Our lives had once been separated by choice. My parents had chosen her over me, but now fate was bringing us into the same orbit again. I couldn't ignore the symbolism. The more information I gathered, the more the pieces lined up. Emily's mortgage wasn't just shaky. It was teetering on the edge. My parents' pleas weren't just emotional. They were born out of panic. And me? I was no longer powerless. I had resources, influence, and most importantly, the truth on my side. The truth that they needed me far more than I would ever need them. I didn't know exactly how I would use it yet, but I knew one thing for certain: the day was coming when I would. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A few weeks after overhearing my mother's call, I received a formal letter in the mail, an invitation to a family meeting. It was written in my mother's handwriting, though she tried to make it sound official, almost businesslike. "We need to discuss Emily's situation," it read. "It's important that you attend." I almost tossed it in the trash, but something in me stirred. This wasn't just another attempt to guilt me. It was them laying their desperation bare. If they were going to summon me like some reluctant benefactor, then I would show up on my terms. The meeting was held at Emily's house, a two-story colonial that still bore the shine of being the family jewel. My parents had always paraded it around as proof of her success. I pulled up in my new truck, parked deliberately at the front where they couldn't miss it, and walked up to the door with steady steps. Inside, the tension was immediate. Emily sat on the couch, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. My father was pacing, his hands stuffed in his pockets. My mother sat rigidly, papers neatly stacked in front of her. They looked up as I entered, and for the first time in my life, I realized they were nervous. "Ryan," my mother said, forcing a smile. "Thank you for coming." I sat across from them, deliberately calm, and folded my hands in my lap. "You said it was important, so here I am." My father cleared his throat. "We've spoken with the bank. They're prepared to move forward with foreclosure unless we intervene. Emily needs immediate financial support. We were hoping you'd reconsider the loan." I leaned back, studying their faces. "You mean the loan you already tried to take out in my name?" My mother bristled. "We only did that because time was short. You should understand, Ryan. Family sometimes requires sacrifice." I let the silence stretch long enough that Emily shifted uncomfortably. Finally, I said, "You're right. Family does require sacrifice. I know that better than anyone." They exchanged hopeful glances, misinterpreting my calm. My father leaned forward. "So, you'll help." That's when I placed a folder on the table. Inside were copies of property deeds, financial statements, and business contracts, all tied to the new investments I had secured. My mother's eyes darted over the documents, confusion flickering across her face. "What's this?" she asked. "This," I said evenly, "is proof that I've built something real, something strong, something that doesn't need your approval. And it just so happens," I added, tapping one of the deeds, "that I now have influence in this community more than you realize." My father frowned. "What does that have to do with Emily?" I looked directly at my sister. Her eyes were wide, a mix of fear and shame. "It means that when the bank decides what to do about your mortgage, whose voice do you think they'll listen to?" The family that burned every bridge they ever had? Or the man who now does business with their partners? The room went silent. My mother's lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came out. My father stopped pacing, his face flushed. Emily looked down at her hands, trembling. I continued, my voice calm but firm. For 15 years, I was nothing to you. Disposable, a mistake. And now, suddenly, I'm the solution to all your problems. But here's the truth. You don't get to rewrite history. You don't get to decide when I matter. My mother finally found her voice. Ryan, you can't mean to let your sister lose everything. That would be cruel. Cruel, I repeated, almost laughing. Cruel was turning an 18-year-old out into the cold without a second thought. Cruel was watching me sleep in my car while you celebrated holidays without me. Cruel was using my name to secure a loan behind my back. I leaned in, lowering my voice to a near whisper. No, cruel would be me pretending this is my problem to solve. Cruel would be giving you exactly what you want and letting you think you still have power over me. Their faces were pale now, the weight of my words settling in. I stood, tucking the folder back under my arm. I came here to show you one thing, I said. You don't hold the cards anymore. I do. And I won't be signing anything for you. I walked toward the door, their voices calling after me. Pleading, bargaining, even threatening. But I didn't turn back. With each step, I felt lighter, stronger, more certain that I had finally broken free of their hold. But as I reached my truck, a thought crossed my mind. Maybe simply saying no wasn't enough. Maybe the real revenge wasn't just in refusing their demands. It was in letting them feel the slow, inevitable crumble of the world they had built on favoritism and lies. And for the first time, I started to plan not just how to protect myself, but how to make sure they finally understood the cost of underestimating me. I didn't hear from them for a few weeks after the meeting. The silence was almost surreal, like standing in the eye of a storm that had finally passed. But storms have a way of circling back, and this one did. It started with whispers around town. At the supply yard, at the diner, even during a city council meeting I attended. People mentioned Emily's name with pity. Word had spread fast. Her house was officially in foreclosure. She had 30 days to vacate. I didn't gloat when I heard it, but I won't lie. It stirred something inside me. Not joy exactly, but a sense of inevitability. The pedestal my parents had built for her was crumbling in full view of everyone who used to admire it. A week later, I saw them again. I was walking out of the bank after finalizing paperwork for a new investment property when I spotted my parents and Emily in the lobby. They looked like shadows of themselves. Tired, frayed, the confident edge gone from their voices. My father muttered something to the teller, who shook her head with professional sympathy. My mother clutched a stack of documents like they might disappear if she let go. Emily stood behind them, eyes downcast, avoiding everyone's gaze. They noticed me. For a second, hope flickered in their faces. My mother even started toward me, lips parting like she was about to say my name, but I didn't stop. I walked past them, my stride steady, my head high. As the glass doors closed behind me, I caught a glimpse of them through the reflection. 3 figures left standing in a building where they no longer had leverage, watching the son they had once discarded move forward without them. The fallout grew worse for them in the weeks that followed. Emily's house was auctioned off. The bank repossessed her car, and the perfect daughter image shattered beyond repair. My parents' friends, the same people they had always bragged to about Emily's accomplishments, started keeping their distance. The invitations to social gatherings dried up. Their pride, which had always been their shield, turned into their greatest liability. Meanwhile, my life kept climbing. The properties I had invested in turned profitable quicker than expected, and my company landed 2 new contracts that cemented my reputation even further. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving on a level my parents could never ignore, even from the sidelines. One evening, I returned home from work to find a letter in my mailbox. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. My mother. Inside, she wrote a single page filled with apologies that felt more desperate than sincere. At the end, she wrote, "Please, Ryan, don't let us fade from your life completely. We're still your parents. I set the letter down on the table and stared at it for a long time. A part of me, the boy who once longed for their love, felt the pull to forgive. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. And forgetting would mean erasing the nights in the car, the years of silence, the betrayal with the loan papers. So I didn't reply. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in the same drawer where I had once kept the fraudulent loan documents. A reminder, not of pain, but of clarity. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by loyalty, by love, by the people who stand by you when you have nothing to offer. My parents had made their choice 15 years ago. I was simply living with the consequences, and so were they. As I sat back in my chair that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Closure. Not because I had hurt them, but because I had finally freed myself from their hold. The final line they had given me at 18 echoed in my mind. You're on your own now. And for the first time, I smiled. Because it was true. I was on my own, and I was better for it. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My name's Marcus. I'm 32 and, for the last 10 years, I've been the unofficial safety net for my family. You know how every family has that one person. The one who bails people out when bills fall through. Who lends money that never gets returned. Who shows up, covers the tab, and makes sure no one ends up sleeping in their car. That's me. I never complain because, for a long time, I thought that's just what family did. You step up, you take care of each other. And growing up without much, I told myself that when I made it, I'd make sure no one else in the family had to feel that kind of struggle again. But I've come to realize something. There's a huge difference between being generous and being taken for granted. And what happened on my birthday this year made that difference painfully clear. It was supposed to be a small but meaningful celebration. Not extravagant, just intimate. People I loved, good food, a chance to catch up, laugh, and take a breather from our busy lives. I'd reserved a private room at a nice local restaurant. Nothing over the top, but classy enough to feel like an occasion. I paid in advance to hold the room, $400, non-refundable. I even picked a place close to everyone's neighborhood so nobody could use distance as an excuse. I created a calendar invite, emailed, and texted it to each family member. Mom, Dad, my older sister Kendra, her husband Tom, my younger brother Jordan, even my cousin Ray and her boyfriend, who somehow got invited to every family event despite never reciprocating. I followed up with reminders the week before and again 2 days before, just to be sure. The day came and I was excited. I wore the blazer my mom got me last Christmas, arrived 15 minutes early, double-checked that the staff had the cake ready, and waited. And waited. First, I brushed it off. My family runs late. Maybe traffic. Maybe someone's kid had a last-minute diaper explosion. I ordered a drink, scrolled through my phone, and smiled at the thought of everyone eventually piling in, out of breath and full of apologies. 30 minutes passed, then 45. Still no one. I texted the group chat, "Hey, everything okay? I'm here when y'all are ready." No reply. An hour in, I felt that first pang of something ugly. Not anger, not yet, but a tight knot in my chest. Embarrassment. I looked around the room. Still perfectly set, candles flickering over untouched silverware. The waiter stopped by with a polite, pitying smile and asked if I'd like to order. I told him I'd wait another 10 minutes. That's when my phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. I opened it and my heart dropped. There it was. A new post from my sister Kendra. A group photo at a steakhouse. Not just her and her husband, but everyone. Everyone. Mom, Dad, Jordan, Ray, even cousin Ray's boyfriend, grinning like this was the highlight of his month. The caption read, "Family night. Grateful for the real ones. #blessed. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. I just stared at the screen, frozen. It didn't make sense. I scrolled through the comments. My aunt had replied, "Looks like so much fun. Missing Marcus." And Kendra had the nerve to comment back, "He had his own plans tonight, I think." My own plans. My own plans were to be sitting at this very table with them. I didn't even feel sad at first. I felt numb. Then the nausea kicked in. I didn't respond. I didn't comment, didn't text, didn't call. I stood up, handed the waiter a tip that cost more than the untouched drink I'd barely sipped, and walked out of that restaurant with my hands shaking. On the drive home, my emotions shifted from confusion to humiliation and finally to something else entirely. Clarity. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a scheduling error or a miscommunication. This was deliberate. And the worst part? It wasn't even the first time something like this had happened. I thought about last Christmas when they forgot to tell me the dinner had moved to Jordan's house. I thought about the family group chat where I always seemed to get tagged last or not at all. I thought about Kendra's bridal shower 5 years ago, how she made a speech thanking everyone but me, even though I'd paid for the damn cake and the custom decorations. I had written it all off as carelessness, as people being people. But this was intentional. This was exclusion dressed up in steak dinners and hashtags. And I started thinking about just how much I'd done for them over the years. The $500 I sent Mom every month to cover her rent in that senior apartment complex she loved. The fact that Dad hadn't paid for his car insurance out of pocket since 2018 because I'd automated it through my own bank account when he got laid off and said, "I'll pay you back as soon as I'm on my feet again." Spoiler alert, he never did. Kendra and Tom's wedding photographer? Me. Jordan's security deposit when he moved to Atlanta? Also me. Ray's emergency dental bill? Yep, me again. I didn't keep score. I never rubbed it in. I just assumed they'd show me the same level of love and consideration when it mattered. Like, say, my birthday. When I got home, I sat on the couch in the dark. I wasn't crying. I didn't even feel like I could. I just kept refreshing that post, watching the likes go up, like the world was confirming that I didn't matter to the people I prioritized most. I could have texted something snarky. I could have called and demanded answers. But instead, I did something else. I opened my banking app. The rent transfer for Mom? Canceled. Her building would send her a notice in a few days. The automated payment for Dad's car insurance? Gone. The policy would lapse if he didn't act fast. I went down the list. Each auto payment, each small favor, each silent, thankless transaction that had become part of my monthly routine, I canceled one by one. And then, for good measure, I posted a story on Instagram. Not petty, not dramatic, just a photo of my untouched birthday cake with a caption that read, "Reminder, I'm the one who pays Mom's rent and Dad's car insurance." No hashtags, no tags, no names. But they saw it. I know they saw it because the next morning my phone exploded. Missed calls from Mom. Texts from Dad asking if everything is okay. Even Jordan sent a message. "Dude, Kendra said you're being dramatic. We didn't think you'd care." Kendra, of course, had the gall to write, "Wow, if you had an issue, you could have said something. No need to air dirty laundry like that." Right? I was the one airing dirty laundry. Not the people who ghosted me on my birthday for a family night I wasn't invited to. But I didn't answer. Not one of them. I left every text on read. Every call to ring out. I went silent. I wasn't even sure what I wanted from them. An apology, a reason. Maybe I just wanted them to sit in the silence for once. To feel the absence of me the way I'd felt theirs. Let the utilities lapse. Let the rent notices pile up. Let them wonder if maybe, just maybe, the person they'd overlooked had finally stopped showing up. And the thing is, that was just the beginning. I didn't expect the silence to hit them so fast or so hard. By the afternoon, Mom had called 4 times. The last voicemail she left was oddly chipper. "Hey honey, not sure if you got my message earlier. Just wanted to check in. I think something weird happened with the rent this month. Maybe a glitch. Anyway, love you. Call me." A glitch, right? As if the sudden reversal of all financial help I'd been providing was some kind of bank hiccup and not a wake-up call with a siren blaring. Then Dad texted, "Got a notice about the insurance. You sure you didn't forget to update the card? Looks like it's overdue. Call me when you can." Like it was a minor oversight. Like I had somehow dropped the ball when the truth was, I'd been carrying the entire team for years. And then there was Kendra. Oh, Kendra. Her first message was short and smug. "Seriously, Marcus, you're embarrassing yourself. We didn't exclude you. We just wanted a chill dinner. You're taking it way too personally." When I didn't respond, she followed up an hour later with, "You could have just said you felt left out. You didn't need to make mom and dad freak out like this." I stared at that one for a while. What got me wasn't even the gaslighting. It was how quickly she pivoted from mocking me to blaming me for the consequences of their actions. Like I had somehow caused all this by reacting to their cruelty instead of the fact that they'd orchestrated it in the first place. It wasn't about feelings. It was about a choice, a deliberate one. They didn't forget me. They didn't think I wouldn't care. They knew exactly what they were doing. And that realization, that hurt more than I thought it would. I didn't reply to her either. Not because I didn't have words, but because I had too many, and none of them would have fixed the root issue. They only valued me for what I could give, not for who I was. The next few days were quiet, painfully so. No new posts from Kendra, no calls from mom. But on the fourth day, Jordan showed up at my door. Literally. I opened it and there he was, standing on my porch like he just popped over to borrow a lawnmower. Hoodie, hands in pockets, sheepish grin. "Hey man," he said, like everything was fine. I leaned against the doorframe. "Didn't realize you were in town." "Yeah, I drove up," he said. "Wanted to talk in person." I stepped aside and let him in. He walked past me like it was still his house, like we were still teenagers, like he hadn't skipped out on my birthday dinner without even a text. He sat on the couch and patted the cushion next to him. "You mad?" That question lit something in me. I didn't sit down. "Mad?" I repeated. "No, I was humiliated. There's a difference." He held up his hands. "All right, fair. But come on. You really think it was some big conspiracy? We just wanted a casual night out. Nobody was trying to hurt you." I walked to the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water just to give myself something to do, something to hold. I stared out the window for a second, then turned back to him. "Jordan, I wasn't invited." He frowned. "That's not true." "Then why didn't anyone say anything when I sent the invites? Why did no one reply when I texted from the restaurant? Why did Kendra say I had other plans? You knew I was sitting alone in a private room, and you posted a group photo like I was a stranger." He looked away for a second, rubbed his jaw. "We didn't think you'd care, man. You always seem so, I don't know, self-sufficient." I laughed short, bitter. "You mean because I pay for everything? Because I never ask for anything in return?" He didn't say anything. "Yeah," I said, nodding. "That's what I thought." He looked uncomfortable. "Look, Mom and Dad are freaking out. They're saying the rent office called and Dad's worried about the car. Can you just maybe give them a heads up before you do stuff like this?" I walked over slow and set the glass down on the coffee table. "I've been giving them heads ups for years, Jordan. Every month, in the form of silent support without complaint, without recognition. You don't get to show up now and ask me to do it louder just because you finally noticed the silence." He stood up, frustrated now. "So what? You're just gonna cut them off? You think you're punishing us, but you're just making everyone's life harder." "No," I said calmly. "You did that when you decided I wasn't family enough to sit at the table." He stared at me for a long moment, like he was trying to come up with something to say that wouldn't sound defensive or stupid. He didn't find anything. "I should go," he muttered. I nodded once and opened the door for him. He paused in the threshold, turned back. "This feels petty, Marcus. Then maybe you've forgotten what being left out feels like." I shut the door behind him and locked it. I stood there for a few minutes, my hands still on the knob, my heart pounding. Not from the argument, but from the sheer weight of finally saying it out loud. I'd spent so long biting my tongue, convincing myself to be the bigger person, telling myself I didn't need acknowledgement. But the truth was I did. I needed to matter, not for what I provided, but for who I was. And for the first time in years, I wasn't going to apologize for expecting that. The fallout hadn't even begun. Mom was still pretending not to know what was happening. Dad was probably blaming it on expired credit cards. Kendra would go from smug to sulking the minute her next spa day got interrupted by a late payment from her Venmo request to Dad. I could already sense the storm brewing, but I wasn't afraid of it anymore. It took exactly 5 days for the mask to come off. 5 days of silence. 5 days without me swooping in to fix anything, cover any bills, or smooth over the messes they'd gotten too used to ignoring. On the sixth morning, I woke up to a voicemail from Mom. Not the chipper kind this time. Her voice was sharp, strained, and barely disguising the panic under the surface. "Marcus, I don't know what's going on with you, but I just got a notice from the building manager. He says the rent still hasn't gone through, and if it's not resolved by Friday, they're going to start the eviction process. I don't understand. Why would you let that happen? Call me." I played the message twice, once to hear it and again to feel it. There was no "I'm sorry," no "we missed you," no recognition of what they'd done. Just confusion that their golden goose had stopped laying rent payments. No mention of the birthday dinner. No mention of me. Just the rent. 2 hours later, I got a similar message from Dad. His was more passive-aggressive. "Hey kiddo, got a letter from the insurance company. Says the car is not covered anymore. You must have changed banks or something. Would have been nice to get a heads up. Anyway, I'm headed to the shop today, so let me know when it's fixed." When it's fixed. Not if. Not can you help. Just the assumption that I'd jump right back in once I'd made my point. Like this was all some dramatic little performance I was staging for attention. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the Notes app on my phone and started typing a list. Every expense I'd covered over the last 3 years. Rent, car insurance, prescription refills, utilities, wedding gifts, emergency loans, surprise birthday dinners for them. Over $42,000, give or take. I wasn't planning to send it, but it felt good to see it, to know that I hadn't imagined how much I'd done because they clearly had. The turning point came the following Saturday. I was home working through some emails when my doorbell rang. I checked the camera. Kendra, hair done, sunglasses on, holding a tray of what looked like cupcakes, store-bought, but repackaged in a decorative tin like that made it more personal. I almost didn't open the door, but some part of me wanted to see what she'd say face to face. I cracked the door open. "Kendra." She gave a fake smile. "Hey, thought I'd drop by. Brought cupcakes. I didn't reach for them." "Why?" Her smile faltered. "Because it's your birthday week." Well, it was. And I know things got a little weird. I leaned against the frame. "Weird." She sighed dramatically. "Okay, tense. But you've kind of made it tense, Marcus. You blew up the group chat with that post." I raised an eyebrow. "I didn't say anything in the chat." "You know what I mean," she said, brushing past me into the living room like she owned the place. "You posted that whole thing about paying Mom's rent and Dad's insurance. And now everyone's freaking out thinking you're cutting them off." I shut the door and turned slowly. "I didn't say I was cutting anyone off." "But you did, Marcus. With the rent and the insurance and everything else. It's not just the money. It's the way you did it. You didn't talk to anyone. You didn't explain." I walked past her, sat down, and finally looked her in the eye. "Kendra, did you explain to me why you organized a dinner across town with everyone but me? Did you talk to me before you made that decision?" She blinked. "It wasn't my dinner. Ray picked the place." I laughed, a hollow sound. "Come on. You tagged everyone. You posted the photo. You left a comment saying I had my own plans. That was your message. Don't act surprised that I finally listened to it." Her expression darkened. "This is what I mean. You're being dramatic. We didn't think you'd care. You're always doing your own thing. You never ask for anything. You always act like you're better than us." I stood up. "No, I act like someone who has boundaries. And you know what? I don't ask for anything because I learned a long time ago that asking doesn't work in this family unless you've got some guilt card to play. But I do show up. Okay, I support, cover. And you know what I get in return? A seat behind the camera. A footnote in your lives." She put the tin of cupcakes on the table and crossed her arms. "So what now? You want us to beg? You want an apology?" I walked over, picked up the tin and handed it back to her. "No," I said. "I just want honesty. If you don't consider me family, that's fine. But don't smile to my face and then pretend I disappeared on my birthday. Don't take my money and then act like my absence is no big deal. You want things back to normal? That was never normal." Her face flushed. "Mom's scared she's going to lose her place. Dad's car is uninsured. You're putting them in danger over some hurt feelings. No, I said quietly. They put themselves in danger when they built their lives on someone they clearly don't respect. I'm just stepping out of the role they wrote for me without my consent. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just stared at me, mouth slightly open like she couldn't believe I was actually standing my ground. Then she turned, walked to the door, and paused before opening it. I hope this is worth it, she said. I hope it makes you think, I replied. And then she left. The fallout came quick after that. Mom called crying 2 days later. Not apologizing, just panicked. I don't know what we're supposed to do. They said we have until Friday or they'll start the process. Why are you doing this, Marcus? I almost answered. Almost. But instead, I wrote something. A message I'd send once the dust settled. Once I was sure they'd finally see me for more than just what I provided. I waited a full week before sending the message. 7 days of ignored texts, missed calls, and a group chat so eerily quiet you'd think someone passed away. Only they hadn't. They just lost their free ride and they were starting to realize it. Mom texted me 5 times in one day. Once to beg, once to guilt trip, and 3 more times to remind me she wasn't getting any younger and needed stability at her age. No mention of the birthday, no mention of the dinner. Just the same cycle of expectations, only this time with a little more panic in her tone. Dad left me a voicemail that actually made me sit down. Marcus, I don't know what happened. I know we've made mistakes. Your mother, your sister, me too. But this insurance situation is serious. If something happens and I'm not covered, please, son, don't make us pay for something Kendra did. That one hit different. Not because of the guilt trip, but because of the truth in it. For once, he acknowledged that someone had done something wrong. And it wasn't me. That was new. Still, it didn't change the facts. He'd benefited just as much. He'd watched it happen over and over again. And silence is still complicity. So I sat down, pulled up my notes, and wrote the message. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't cruel. It was just honest. Hi everyone. I wanted to clarify a few things since there seems to be confusion. I didn't cut anyone off. I simply stopped doing things I was never thanked for in the first place. The rent, the car insurance, the bills, I did those things because I wanted to help. But I've come to realize that my support was never appreciated. Just expected. I spent my birthday sitting alone in a restaurant I paid for. No one showed. No one texted. Instead, you all had a separate dinner and posted about it like I didn't exist. That wasn't an oversight. That was a message. And I heard it loud and clear. So, here's where things stand. I'm not going to pay for people who don't treat me like family. If that changes, we can talk. But until then, I'm prioritizing people who show up for me, not just my wallet. Marcus. I sent it. No fluff. No room for misinterpretation. I even watched the little scene by icons pop up one by one in the family group chat. Kendra first, of course, then Ray, then Mom, then Dad. And then the flood began. Kendra responded almost instantly. Wow. I can't believe you'd air all this in front of everyone. Way to make us all feel like garbage. I didn't reply. Mom followed up a minute later. I understand you're hurt, but don't punish everyone over one night. We love you. We've always loved you. That one stung because it was technically true. But loving someone while constantly taking from them without care or respect. That's not love. That's ownership. Then Ray. I didn't even know it was your birthday dinner. Kendra just said you were doing your own thing. Don't drag me into this. Typical Ray. Always the first to backpedal when accountability knocks. Dad didn't respond in the chat, but a couple of hours later, he sent a private message. I messed up. You've done more for this family than any of us ever acknowledged. I let your sister run the show because it was easier. I should have stepped in a long time ago. You didn't deserve what happened. If you're open to it, I'd like to sit down. Just us. That took me by surprise. I didn't answer right away. I let a few days pass, not out of pettiness, just to see what they'd do without me. Mom started dropping passive-aggressive Facebook posts. You know the type. Family isn't always about blood. And some people only do nice things so they can hold them over your head later. Kendra doubled down by posting Instagram stories of her new family dinners with her friends, complete with captions like, "At least these people show up." Ray went silent, which was probably for the best. And Jordan? He actually texted me, "Just wanted to say I get it now. I thought you were overreacting, but yeah, that was low. If you ever want to hang out, just us, I'm down. No pressure." I stared at that message longer than I should have. Jordan had always been the one who floated somewhere in the middle. Too passive to stand up for me, too loyal to Kendra to question her. But maybe now he was finally seeing what I saw. Still, I didn't reply. Not yet. A few more weeks passed. Mom missed her rent deadline. I knew because her building sent me the overdue notice by mistake. I was still listed as her emergency contact. I didn't call them. I didn't pay. She figured it out eventually. Dad ended up missing a DMV renewal because his expired insurance lapsed in the system. He paid out of pocket. I know this because he updated his own policy without asking me. First time in 6 years. Things were changing. And then one Saturday morning, I got another knock on the door. This time it was Dad. No warning, no call, just him standing on my porch holding 2 coffees. He looked older than I remembered, grayer, heavier around the eyes. I opened the door slowly. "You drove all the way up here." He handed me one of the cups. "Didn't think you'd answer the phone." I stepped aside. "You were right." We sat in silence for a while, just sipped our coffee and watched the neighborhood kids ride their bikes past the house. It felt normal until he broke the silence. "I read your message a few times," he said. "I think I needed to see it in writing. I didn't realize how blind I'd been." I didn't say anything. I let Kendra do too much of the talking. She's always been the loud one. You've always been the quiet one. And I guess I just let her fill the space. I nodded slowly. "She didn't just fill it, Dad. She used it. Weaponized it." He winced. "Yeah, she did." Another pause. "I'm not asking for money," he added quickly. "I came here because I wanted to apologize. Not because I'm losing something, but because I already lost something. You. And I don't want to keep doing that." That caught me off guard. It was the first real apology I'd ever heard from him that didn't come with a condition or an ask. Just honesty. I set the cup down. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you probably know." He nodded. "I'm not perfect, but I'm learning. And I hope one day the rest of the family learns, too." After he left, I sat with it all. Let it sink in. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. I was just tired. Tired of being the one who kept the engine running while everyone else got to ride in the passenger seat. But now they were finally learning what the road looked like without me. Weeks turned into months. Kendra eventually sent me a long email. Half apology, half deflection. I didn't respond, not because I hated her, but because I didn't trust her. Not yet. Mom called again a few times, each one a little softer, a little more like the woman I remembered growing up with. I answered the last one. We talked about nothing, about everything. She didn't ask for help. I didn't offer. That was the first real conversation we'd had in years. Jordan started visiting more. He even invited me to his new apartment, paid for on his own. He offered me a drink and we sat on his mismatched couch and watched a game like brothers who didn't need words to patch things up. I didn't go back to paying their bills. But I did start building something else, boundaries. And weirdly, they started to respect them. Some days it was awkward, some days it was healing, but it was finally real. And on my next birthday, I didn't make a reservation. I didn't send invites. I didn't pay for a single thing. Instead, I let people show me what they were willing to bring to the table. Now on to the next story. Story 6. At the reception, my dad gave a toast to my real kids. The ones who make us proud. My brother laughed. My name was never said. I smiled, walked to the gift table, retrieved the $5,000 honeymoon check I left, and whispered to the bride, "Enjoy the silence instead." My brother followed me out begging. I kept walking. Then, behind me, the DJ announced, "Weddings are a performance." I've always known that. What I didn't realize until that day was that sometimes the performance is just a thin curtain hiding the rot behind the stage. And if you're the one who doesn't play their part right, they'll let you know fast. My younger brother Caleb was the golden child. Always had been. When he got engaged to Lily, everyone went full production mode. My parents offered up their backyard for the rehearsal dinner. My cousins flew in from Texas, and my aunt designed the invitations. Meanwhile, I was asked for something less photogenic. Money. $5,000 to be exact. For the honeymoon, they'd already spent too much on the venue. Lily's dress had cost more than my car, and they wanted to do Bali, right? My parents said they were overextended, and Caleb came to me like it was already decided. Said I was the only one in the family comfortable enough to help. I make a decent living in tech. Not flashy, but solid. So I sent it quietly. No lecture, no strings. The day of the wedding, I arrived alone like I always do at these things. Nobody offered to sit with me. No one saved a seat. I brought a card with the check inside, placed it on the gift table under a pile of boxes wrapped in white and gold paper. I wasn't expecting fireworks, just a basic acknowledgement. The ceremony passed in a blur of choreographed tears and drone footage. At the reception, my dad stood to give a toast. He cleared his throat, held up his glass, and grinned. To my real kids, the ones who make us proud. The room exploded with laughter. Caleb almost fell out of his chair. Lily giggled into her champagne. Even my mom smiled and clapped. I waited for him to correct himself to say something like, "Just kidding. Love you too, Mason." But he didn't. He moved on to a story about Caleb's high school football days. I wasn't mentioned once. I sat there and smiled. That's the part one hate most. How automatic it was. How trained I've been to sit through it all like it's fine. After a while, I stood up, walked calmly across the hall to the gift table. No one noticed. I found their card, opened it, and slipped the check back into my pocket. Lily saw me. Her eyes darted toward Caleb, then back to me. I leaned in and said just loud enough for her to hear, "Enjoy the silence instead." Then I turned and left. Caleb followed me out into the parking lot. He called my name over and over, asked what I was doing, told me not to make a scene. I didn't say a word, just kept walking. As I reached my car, I heard the DJ over the speakers. "Well, folks, no need to panic. Just a little bit of drama to spice up the night. Let's hear it for awkward family moments." Then came the music. Loud, fast, cheerful. The crowd cheered. He started cracking jokes about open bars and in-laws. Everyone moved on like I'd never been there at all. And still, that wasn't the end. Not even close. I didn't go straight home after leaving the wedding. I drove for hours. No music, no calls. Just the low hum of the engine and the sound of tires cutting through silence. Eventually, I ended up at this old lake about an hour out of town. I used to go there when I was in college whenever I needed to think without someone talking over me. I sat on a bench and watched the dark water shift under the moonlight, thinking how familiar it felt. Beautiful on the surface, cold underneath. My phone started vibrating just after midnight. Missed calls stacked one on top of the other. Caleb was first, then my mom, then Lily, then my uncle. A couple of cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. The messages started pouring in too. Most were some version of, "What the hell? What's wrong with you? Why would you ruin the wedding?" I didn't answer. Around 9 o'clock the next morning, the tone changed. I got a long, angry message from my mom about how Caleb and Lily were devastated, how the atmosphere at the reception shifted after I left, and how people were whispering. She said my exit was childish and cruel and that I should have thought about the embarrassment I caused them. I read it 3 times, not because it hurt, but because it didn't, not even a little. Then came the message that told me everything I needed to know. My father, never much for subtlety, sent me one line. "We all agreed that money was a wedding gift. You don't get to take it back. We expect you to return it immediately." There it was. Not "Are you okay?" or "What happened?" or even "We need to talk." Just a demand like I was a vending machine they'd kicked and now wanted a refund from. I texted back, "You assumed. That's your mistake." A minute later he replied, "You've embarrassed the family." I didn't bother responding. By noon it was clear this wasn't going to be a one-day thing. Caleb finally got through. I let it ring 4 times before I picked up. His voice was calm, too calm, like someone trying not to spook a bear. He said they'd already booked everything. The flights, the hotel, the excursions. He said I knew how much they needed that trip, how much they'd counted on me, and how cruel it was to rip it away. He said it wasn't just a gift. It was part of a plan, a family plan. I let him talk. Then I asked, "You mean the plan where I pay and you pretend I don't exist?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "This isn't you. You don't do things like this." I told him maybe he never really knew me. Maybe he just liked having someone around who never said no. Then I hung up. That night, my mom called again, this time sobbing. She said Lily's parents had heard and they were mortified that people had started gossiping about how the brothers stormed out with the check and how it made them all look like trashy drama magnets. She said, "I had a chance to fix it before things got worse." I asked what that meant. And then, without missing a beat, she said, "If you're going to act like you're not one of us, we'll make it official. Don't expect any part of the family investments going forward." There it was, the real reason for the panic. I wasn't just their quiet, dependable son anymore. I was suddenly a threat to the whole image they built. The black sheep they couldn't control. The one who decided he wasn't going to stay in the background anymore. I looked at the text a few more times before turning off my phone completely. They thought they were punishing me. They thought this was the worst they could do, but they didn't understand something yet. I wasn't even close to done. The next morning, I turned my phone back on and watched the flood continue. My voicemail was full. The family group chat, which had been mostly wedding photos and forced enthusiasm, had now turned into a tribunal. My cousin Jenna asked if I was having a breakdown. My aunt wanted to mediate before things got uglier. My dad hadn't said much more since his threat, but he didn't need to. The others were delivering the message for him now. Then Caleb texted, and this time he wasn't calm. "We need that money back. You knew what it was for. This isn't funny anymore." I stared at it for a while before replying, "It was never funny. You just didn't care until you lost something." 15 minutes later, I got an email. Not a message, an actual email. It was from my dad. He attached a summary of a verbal agreement stating that the money I gave was discussed in the family chat. It wasn't that I had agreed to fund the honeymoon. I hadn't. And that I was now in breach of an informal commitment that the family had relied on. He CC'd my mom and Caleb. I laughed out loud in my kitchen alone. Then I responded with 2 sentences. There was no agreement. I took back what was mine. That was all I said. Later that afternoon, I got a call from my mom. She didn't start with a hello. Just launched in, "You need to send the money back. They're canceling things. Lily's parents are furious. They said this whole thing looks trashy, like we can't even afford our own son's wedding." I stayed quiet. She kept going. Said I was being selfish. Said I'd always been touchy, but this was beyond that. Said if I didn't return the money, it would be proof that I was cutting myself off from the family completely. That I'd chosen this. I finally said, "No, you made the choice. You just didn't think I'd ever respond." She told me I was being dramatic, that I was hurting people who loved me. And that's when I told her something I hadn't said out loud before. I've been useful, not loved. That's the difference. She didn't argue. She just hung up. That evening, I got a voicemail from Caleb. No yelling this time. He sounded defeated. Said they were losing the resort booking, that they'd already paid for part of it, and now it was gone. He told me I'd ruined their plans. Maybe their whole beginning. He said something that stuck with me. "You didn't just take the money. You made a point to hurt us." That one actually made me pause because he was right. I had made a point. For years, I'd let things slide. The snide comments, the exclusion, the way they used my help and never looked back. I was always the one who kept it together, who didn't make trouble. But not anymore. And that terrified them. By the end of the week, the group chat was silent. No more pleas. No more arguments. Just a single message from my father sent at 10:03 p.m. on a Friday night. "You're out. Don't come asking for anything." I left it on read, but I wasn't angry anymore. Something was shifting, and they had no idea what was coming. A few mornings after the silence started, I heard a knock at my apartment door. I wasn't expecting anyone and I wasn't in the mood for more drama. But something about the timing made me open it anyway. No one was there, just 2 envelopes lying on the mat. One had the family lawyer's name printed in the return address. The other had my mom's handwriting on the front. I opened the lawyer's first. It was short, cold, and calculated. A formal notification that I was being removed from the family trust effective immediately. The investments, the property shares, the backup accounts I was always vaguely told would be ours someday gone. No room for discussion. No signature from my dad. Just his accountant and a stamped seal. Honestly, it didn't surprise me. I'd expected it since the second they realized I wouldn't just give the money back. What did surprise me was the second envelope. My mom had written it by hand. That alone told me it wasn't a quick reaction. Her handwriting was neat, overly careful, like she'd rewritten it a few times. Started soft, said she hoped I was okay, which felt like a test balloon to see if I'd cave. But then it turned sharp. She wrote that I'd changed, that I used to be the steady one, the son they could rely on to smooth things over, not cause them. She said she couldn't understand why I'd throw away everything, why I'd go this far, just to make a point. And then she said something I read 3 times. If you needed attention that badly, there were better ways to ask for it. That hit different. It wasn't anger. It was disappointment laced with disbelief. Like she genuinely couldn't grasp why I wouldn't just take the punchline again and keep smiling. She closed the letter by saying they were protecting what was left of the family, and if I wasn't going to be part of it, then they had to move forward without me. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table and I made 2 lists. First list. Everything I've done for this family. Filled 2 pages. All the things no one asked for but everyone expected. Paying for things. Showing up. Keeping quiet. Remembering birthdays no one remembered back. Driving 2 hours just to help Caleb fix his furnace because he didn't want to call a professional. Sitting through dozens of family dinners where I was the only one asked about work just to make them feel better about Caleb's lack of direction. Second list. Everything they did for me. That one stayed mostly blank. I left the list on the table and went to the balcony to get some air. That's when the buzzer rang. It was Caleb. I almost didn't answer it, but I needed to see what version of him would show up. Angry, begging, or fake forgiving. He looked rough. Hoodie, red eyes, holding a manila folder like it had weight to it. He didn't ask to come in, just said, "You need to see something." I let him talk. Inside the folder were printed screenshots and email threads between him and Lily before the wedding. Planning stuff. First, I didn't get it. Then I saw it. An email from Lily sent to Caleb 2 months before the wedding. Let Mason cover the honeymoon. He wants to feel needed. Otherwise, he'll start pulling away again. He does this. Just give him a role. Another. Honestly, we're doing him a favor. He wants to be close to the family so badly. He'll feel important if we make it look like he's helping, and it saves us a ton. Caleb looked ashamed. He said he hadn't seen those emails until now. That Lily had handled most of the honeymoon logistics and used their shared drive to back up all the wedding plans. He said he was going through the folders when he saw them. I didn't say anything. Then he said, "I think I married someone who never saw you as a person, just a wallet. And I think we all got used to that, too." I still didn't speak. I just stared at the papers. He stood there holding the folder like he wanted me to do something with it. Burn it. Frame it. Throw it back at him. I did none of those things. Then he said one more thing before he left. "She said you were always desperate to belong. I think we just liked that you never pushed back." He left the folder on my counter. I didn't follow him. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care what came next. After Caleb left, I sat with that folder for a long time. I didn't reread the emails. I didn't need to. I remembered every word. Not because they were surprising, but because they confirmed something I'd been avoiding for years. I was useful to them, not loved. They didn't want me happy. They wanted me quiet, convenient, and reliable. That night, I opened a new document on my laptop and started writing out a plan. Not for revenge, not for any dramatic confrontation. A plan for myself. I listed what I wanted to do now that I wasn't obligated to perform for people who saw me as background noise. I signed up for a language course I'd been putting off for years. I booked a solo trip to Ireland. I unsubscribed from every group text and email thread with my family's name on it. I blocked a few numbers, including my mother's. And when I looked at the folder again, I didn't feel anything, just clarity. A week passed then too. No calls, no surprise visits. Then my dad emailed me. The subject line just said, "Follow up on trust decision." The message was cold and professional. He explained that removing me from the trust had financial implications and that I should have considered long-term consequences before making such a dramatic choice. He finished by reminding me that family is about loyalty and that without loyalty, there's no foundation to stand on. I replied with one sentence, "You only care about loyalty when someone stops serving you." The next day, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't pick up, but they left a voicemail. It was my mom. She sounded panicked, said things were falling apart, that Caleb and Lily weren't doing well, that Lily had stepped away for a while to process things. She said my father was trying to liquidate a property early and it wasn't going well. Then she said, "This is what happens when we're not united." I listened to that part twice. That was the moment I realized they'd never really been a unit. They just leaned on the one person they thought would never leave. And when I finally walked away, the whole thing cracked. A few days later, Caleb messaged me again. He said he moved out, said he wasn't sure if the marriage was going to make it, said Lily blamed me for everything unraveling, but he didn't know what to think anymore. I told him he'd figure it out. He asked if we could meet up sometime. I said maybe, but I didn't mean it. Instead, I focused on building something for myself. I started a small business consulting gig on the side just for fun. Turns out, when you stop trying to be everything for everyone else, you get real time back. I hit the gym regularly. I started cooking again. I met new people who didn't know anything about my family and didn't care. They liked me just for me. No strings, no debt to pay. A month later, my dad sent a message through a mutual friend. He said the family was open to talking again if I was willing to apologize. I laughed when I read it. Not the polite kind. The deep, real kind. The kind that makes you breathe easier after. That was the day I finally replied to nothing. Not even to say no. I just lived. And they hated it. It's been 7 months since I walked out of Caleb's wedding with the honeymoon money. 7 months since the toast, the DJ's cover-up, the envelopes on my doorstep, and the last voicemail from my mother trying to play the collapse of our family like it was somehow my fault. I haven't spoken to any of them since. Not once. And the strange part, I've never felt more clear-headed. I live in a better apartment now downtown. Quieter building, less drama. I get up early, work with clients I actually like, travel when I feel like it, and I'm not answering to anyone. I've made friends who don't know me as the brother of Caleb or son of Rick and Diane. I've stopped trying to explain the silence. It just is. A few weeks ago, I heard from Jenna, my cousin. She asked if I was still on the outs with the family. I didn't answer directly. She ended up sending a few screenshots of messages from the group chat I'm no longer in. Mostly harmless, but I saw a few lines that made me smile. Apparently, Caleb moved back in with my parents. Temporarily, of course. Lily moved out for space and they're in counseling now. The honeymoon never got rescheduled. My dad's antique business is down because they lost their website when I took my name off the domain registration. They're trying to find someone new, but no one can get the layout right. They've had to sell one of the investment properties, the one I used to manage repairs for. Jenna added this in her last message. You'd think they'd be mad, but honestly, they're mostly confused you haven't come crawling back yet. That one stuck with me because that's it. Really, that's the part that gets them. Not that I embarrassed them. Not that I ruined the wedding or took my money back. It's that I stopped playing along. I didn't come back. I didn't try to fix things. They never thought I'd survive without them. And now I'm doing better than ever. So last night, I sat on my balcony. Same view I've seen for months now. And I wrote it all down. Everything. The wedding, the toast, the envelope, the folder Caleb brought, the cold letters, the silence. And I looked at the last line I wrote. This is as low as it gets. Not for me, for them. 2 months of silence passed. Not the kind you fight through, but the kind that lets you breathe again. No messages, no sudden knocks at my door, no unexpected drama. I thought it was over. I'd moved on, or at least I believed I had, until one Tuesday morning, an unfamiliar name popped up in my inbox. Cameron Hunt. Subject: regarding Caleb and Lily, urgent. I didn't open it right away. I wasn't in a hurry to revisit that world, but something about the subject line felt off. Cold, legal. I opened it. Cameron introduced himself as Lily's attorney, her separation attorney. Apparently, things had escalated fast between her and Caleb. Divorce wasn't official yet, but she had filed for formal separation and was seeking control over what she called contributions made toward the marriage by external parties. Specifically, she was trying to classify my honeymoon check as a marital gift, which meant she wanted the $5,000. Still, attached to the email were a few scanned pages from their prenup. I didn't even know they had one, but there it was, buried in the wording, a clause about wedding gifts intended for joint use. They were arguing that my money qualified. And just like that, I was pulled back into a mess I had no intention of ever touching again. I forwarded the email to a lawyer I knew from a startup I'd consulted with. She read the message, then called me laughing. Her exact words were, "This is legally pathetic, but just to be safe, I'll draft a response." 3 days later, Cameron replied their claim was being withdrawn. No apology, no explanation, just a formality. But I knew that meant Lily's plan had failed. And someone, probably Caleb, had told her I'd never go down without a fight. That night, I got a message from Caleb. It said, "She's leaving. She's taking everything she can. They're saying it's your fault." I didn't respond. An hour later, another came in. "Mom said you poisoned her against us, that you've been working to tear the family apart. They're rewriting everything." That I believed. Not because I had, but because that's what they do. They can't face their own rot, so they invent a villain. I just made it easy by walking away. I didn't respond to that message either. A few days passed. Then Jenna texted me out of nowhere. She told me Caleb had moved back home. Said my dad told him he wasn't focused enough to stay involved in the family business. My mom was supposedly in full meltdown mode, crying to anyone who would listen about how everything changed when Mason turned on us. According to Jenna, they'd started liquidating small things. Stocks, some heirlooms, maybe one of the condos they'd been renting out. Quietly, of course. Pride doesn't allow announcements like that. And then she dropped something I didn't see coming. "They want to sue you." Apparently, my dad had floated the idea of filing something, anything, just to make a point. Even if it didn't hold, they wanted to remind Mason who he's dealing with. I laughed when I read that out loud alone in my apartment. It was so on brand, it could have been a scene from a bad movie. I told Jenna they better not waste the last of their money chasing someone who stopped caring. Later that week, I went to dinner with someone new. No expectations, just a night out with a person who didn't know a thing about my last name or the mess I used to call a family. Halfway through dinner, while she was talking about a trip to Portugal, my phone lit up. Caleb again. This time, just one sentence. "You were right. We were never people to them. Just props." I didn't open the message. I flipped the phone face down and left it there because by then, I finally understood something that had taken years to sink in. Some people aren't supposed to come with you when you get better. And letting go of them isn't cruel. It's survival. Now on to the next story. Story 7. "You shouldn't have come," my mom said, cutting vegetables without even looking at me. My dad laughed. "It's not like anyone missed you last year either." I smiled, left my gift bag, and drove off quietly. 30 minutes later, I got a call from the florist. Cancellation confirmed. Then from the bank, joint account access removed. Then the family group chat exploded with, "Why would you do this?" I smiled and replied. After everything they said, I felt like a failure. Not because I didn't try. I overthought every detail for weeks. What to wear, what to bring, how to act. I told myself it didn't matter what happened last year. That maybe they'd softened. That maybe if I showed them I was still willing to be part of their lives, something would shift. I was wrong. I pulled up to their house an hour early, parked down the block like I was a guest rather than their son, and sat in the car rehearsing how I'd say hello. It was their 31st anniversary this time. Nothing extravagant like the party last year, but there'd still be people. A couple dozen guests, family, friends, church folks, some neighbors, and me, invited technically but not welcomed. Last year, they celebrated without me. I wasn't left out. I was excluded completely. They didn't even try to explain it until weeks later when my mom told me they just wanted peace that night. When I pressed her, she finally admitted it had been deliberate. That conversation stuck with me for months. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving or Christmas. No one called. So this year, when the invite finally came through a forwarded email, not even a direct message, I hesitated. But I still went. I showed up carrying a carefully prepared gift bag filled with things I knew they'd love. Custom gifts, thoughtful stuff, the kind of things that take time and effort. I spent around $1,000 not to buy love, but to try to show them they still mattered, even if I wasn't sure I did to them. I walked into the kitchen where my mom was slicing vegetables. She didn't look up. "You shouldn't have come," she said. Just like that. My dad, still in his apron, chuckled. "It's not like anyone missed you last year either. They didn't even pretend. Not in front of me. Not even when I handed over the gift bag and said, 'Happy anniversary.' No thank you. No eye contact. Just silence." So I turned around and walked out. I passed through the dining room, saw the guests trickling in. Some already sitting with drinks, some asking where I was going, and others just staring. My uncle glanced toward the kitchen, then looked at me with this puzzled expression like he knew something wasn't right, but didn't want to get involved. My parents stayed where they were. They didn't chase me. They didn't explain to anyone why I left 5 minutes after arriving. I hope someone asked. I hope they squirmed trying to answer. I got back in the car and sat there with my hands on the steering wheel for a long time. Not driving, just thinking. Not about the embarrassment that was theirs now, but about how much time and energy I had wasted on people who clearly didn't care. Then I opened my phone. I didn't even hesitate. First, I canceled the bouquet scheduled to arrive tomorrow morning. White lilies and blue orchids in a crystal vase. Cost me over $200. Gone. Next, I logged into the bank app. The joint account they'd been accessing for almost 2 years. Removed. It was never supposed to be a lifeline, but it turned into one. $3,000 a month. Quietly covering their bills, their groceries, their streaming subscriptions, and rent for my sister in another city. They never once said thank you. A few minutes later, the confirmations rolled in. Florist cancellation confirmed. Bank joint account access removed. Then the group chat lit up like a fire alarm. "Why would you do this? Are you serious right now? You just embarrassed your parents in front of everyone." And finally, the one that made me laugh out loud in the car. "What kind of son does this on their anniversary?" I typed one sentence. "You said you were better off without me. Now you get to prove it." Then I turned off my phone, pulled out of their neighborhood, and didn't look back. It was the first time in years I didn't feel guilty for putting myself first. I thought after what I said, they'd go quiet. Maybe sulk for a week or two and lick their wounds like they always did when things didn't go their way. I didn't expect what came next. Not how fast, not how desperate. By the time I parked at home and stepped inside, my phone was going off nonstop. 6 missed calls, 2 voicemails, all from my parents. I didn't answer any of them. I sat down on the couch, finally exhaled, and let the quiet settle in. For once, no one was around to twist my words, guilt trip me, or tell me I was imagining things. I felt something strange. I think it was relief, but it didn't last long. At 8:13 p.m., my sister Katie texted, "Hey, what happened?" I stared at the screen for a second. Then came another, "I just got a notice my rent payment failed. I thought Dad handled that." There it was, the unraveling. Katie didn't know the money had been coming from me. I never told her. A year and a half ago, when she called me crying after Mom said she needed to figure it out on her own, I stepped in. I called the landlord, paid 3 months in advance, and quietly linked her apartment to the joint account I let our parents use. They made her believe it was them helping. Now, the lie had collapsed in one night. I didn't answer her right away. I wasn't sure how. I didn't want her caught in the middle, but she was already there whether I liked it or not. A little after 10 o'clock, my dad left a voicemail. I almost didn't listen, but I did. And I'll never forget the shift in his voice. "All right, you've made your point," he said. "But this isn't just about us. You've hurt your sister. You've made a scene in front of everyone. You've embarrassed the whole family. You think cutting us off is some kind of victory?" Then he paused. "You want to play this game? Don't forget who gave you everything." That line stuck with me. Gave me everything. Like I hadn't been covering their bills for nearly 2 years. Like I hadn't picked up the slack every time they were late on something and pretended it was just a temporary thing. I didn't reply. The next morning, I woke up to a knock. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I checked the peephole first. It was Katie. She looked exhausted, pale, her hair tied back in a rush. She didn't even wait for an invitation. She just walked past me into the apartment like she'd been holding her breath the whole way there. "I had to drive 3 hours because no one would tell me anything," she said. She didn't even sit. "You didn't need to do that. You canceled the rent payment." "Yes, I'm not canceling your support, just their access." She blinked. "Wait, what?" I told her the truth. All of it. That I'd been the one paying, that I hadn't wanted her to feel indebted, and that they let her believe it was them because it made them look good. She sat down, quiet. "So, all those thank you messages I sent to Mom?" I nodded. "I saw them in the family group chat." She looked sick. I sat across from her. "Listen, I'll keep helping you directly, not through them. But I'm done playing the good son for people who hate me unless I'm useful." She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "They're going to come after you hard." "I know." And they did. The rest of the day was a slow-building storm. My mom sent me a long message about how she had given up everything for us. My dad wrote something about betrayal and bloodlines. My aunt texted me too. "Please reconsider before you burn this bridge completely." Then came the real twist. That evening, my mom called Katie. She didn't even know I was in the room when Katie answered. "We're sorry," Mom said. "Tell Andrew to come by tomorrow. We just want to talk." Katie looked at me. I could hear it in her voice. She wanted to believe them, but I just nodded. I already knew it wasn't going to be what they claimed. She told them I'd come, and I did. I knew it wasn't going to be an apology. Not a real one. They don't apologize. They adjust their tone when it benefits them. They reframed the story to look like peacemakers, but, sorry. That word doesn't live in that house. Still, I went. Katie called me in the morning, said they wanted to talk, that they felt bad. She sounded hopeful or maybe just tired. Tired of being in the middle. "They want to make things right," she said. "Sure," I told her. "Let's see what that means to them." I pulled into the driveway just after noon. It was quiet, too quiet. No guests, no chatter. The cars were gone. But the tension wasn't. Katie opened the door before I knocked. She looked nervous. "They're waiting in the living room," she said. I stepped inside. Same house, same smell, same heaviness. They were both sitting on the couch, stiff like actors waiting for the curtain to rise. My dad gave me that fake, restrained smile he used when he wanted to seem reasonable in front of outsiders. My mom stared at the coffee table like she was rehearsing lines in her head. I sat down across from them. I didn't say a word. My mom spoke first. "We've had some time to think," she said. "And maybe we didn't handle things as kindly as we should have, especially on a day like yesterday." My dad picked up right where she left off like they'd practiced it. "You've always been emotional, Andrew. We get that. But there's a way to resolve things without burning everything down." I waited. "Walking out like that," he continued. "It humiliated us in front of everyone. You think that didn't hurt?" There it was. The core of it. Not the way they treated me, not what they said, just how it looked to others. How it made them feel when the whispers started. When people asked where I went, why I left. That was the real wound. They looked bad. I said nothing, just listened. My mom shifted in her seat. "We know things haven't been perfect, but you canceling that account, that didn't just affect us. You know your sister needs that rent money." That's when Katie came in. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy. She sat beside Mom, looked directly at me and said, I just don't want this to destroy everything. It already feels like everything's falling apart. I turned to her. You shouldn't be here right now. She blinked. What? This conversation isn't about you. I already told you I'll cover your rent. I'm not going to let you suffer for their mistakes. But don't let them use you like a chess piece. That's what this is. She looked down, silent. My dad leaned forward. You think you're above this family now? You wouldn't be where you are if it weren't for us. You think your success just came out of thin air? No, I said. I got where I am by doing the opposite of everything you taught me. He stood up suddenly. Don't push it. You think cutting off money gives you power? We can talk too. People listen to us. Don't think we won't make calls. Don't think your job's so safe you can't be touched. I stood too. I've worked too hard to get where I am to be afraid of two unemployed manipulators with nothing to lose. My mom looked shocked for a second. Just 1 second. And then furious. You think you're better than us? She said. After everything we did. You didn't raise a son. You raised a bank account. I said. And now the account is closed. Katie stood quietly and moved away from them, closer to me. That was the first sign that maybe she saw it too, what they really were. I turned toward the door. My dad called after me. You'll regret this, Andrew. But I didn't even pause. I left that house again. This time not angry, not confused, just done. Later that night, Katie texted me again. Just one line. You were right. I didn't see it before. I told her I'd start sending rent directly to her landlord and not to worry about dealing with them. I wouldn't let her fall with them, but I wasn't coming back. That same night, my uncle called. He left a voicemail, said they were devastated, that I was being cruel, and that I needed to man up and fix it. I blocked his number. My parents were just getting started. When guilt stopped working, they'd move on to their next strategy. Manipulation was only phase 1. I knew what was coming next. I expected a few days of silence after that. But less than 24 hours later, I got a letter. Not a text, not a call. A letter, a printed envelope delivered to my apartment. No return address, just my name in neat cursive. I opened it slowly, already knowing it wasn't going to be pleasant. Inside was a 2-page letter, typed. My dad's tone was cold, rehearsed. He said they were considering legal options to recover family contributions made over the past 2 years. He listed things I had paid for as if they were debts I now owed back to them. My sister's rent, a roof repair I paid for, groceries, even my dad's dental work. He ended it with, "You made a choice. So did we." I sat there staring at it, not even angry, just stunned by how far they were willing to go. They were trying to flip the whole thing and paint themselves as victims of my financial abuse. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so deliberate. I scanned the letter and sent it to a lawyer friend. He read it and called me 5 minutes later. "This is absurd," he said. "But it's also calculated. They want to rattle you, make you panic. They're trying to bait me." I said. "Exactly. Ignore it. If they actually file something, I'll handle it, but don't respond. They're hoping you will." That same night, I got a text from Katie. "They just told me you're stealing from the family. They're telling everyone you emptied their retirement fund." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so cartoonishly evil. I hadn't touched a cent of theirs. They never had a retirement fund. The only money flowing in came from me. But it didn't matter. They were rewriting the story already. And then something happened I didn't expect. Katie showed up again. But this time, she wasn't alone. She brought my cousin Evan. I hadn't seen him in over a year. We weren't particularly close growing up, but he'd always been one of the few family members who didn't play along with the drama. He stood in my doorway holding a brown folder and looking serious. "I think you need to see this," he said. Inside were screenshots, notes, and emails. He'd been at the anniversary party, and apparently after I left, he overheard a lot more than I realized. My mom had gone room to room telling different guests a slightly different version of what happened. To one, she said I refused to help anymore and threw a tantrum. To another, she implied I'd been using the joint account to control them, suggesting I had threatened to withhold funds before. Evan had quietly been piecing it all together. He had recordings, texts, enough to prove I wasn't the one lying. "I didn't know what to do with all this," he said. "But I figured you might." I took the folder. I didn't even have a plan yet, but just knowing I had evidence was enough for now. That weekend, my dad tried calling again. I declined. An hour later, Katie sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post my mom made public. It wasn't just some vague, passive-aggressive thing. She straight up wrote a full-blown monologue about how their only son had turned against the family and how they were now struggling to survive without the money he ripped away. It got likes, sympathy comments, prayers. They were performing publicly. So, I posted one sentence under it. "Should I start posting receipts? Or would you prefer I deliver them in person?" 5 minutes later, she deleted the post. The group chat went silent. Evan texted me, "Well, that shut them up, but I knew better. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. They had lost the financial support but not the hunger for control. And I had just made it clear I wasn't going back." After the Facebook stunt collapsed, things got quiet again. But it wasn't the kind of quiet you trust. It was the pause between a spark and the explosion. By now, almost every family member had picked a side. A few reached out to me privately to say they understood, but they always followed it with something like, "Maybe it's time to just let it go," or "Family is family." You know what they meant was, go back, be quiet, let them win. Then came the voicemail. I woke up to it on a Tuesday morning. A blocked number. I wasn't going to check it, but something told me to. It was my mom crying. Real or fake, I couldn't tell. She was talking slow, like she wanted each word to land. "You win, okay?" she said. "We were wrong. I see that now. I don't want this to go on forever. We just want our family back. Please come by tonight. Just talk to us. No yelling, no blame. We just want to make it right." I played it twice. It was the first time she'd ever said, "We were wrong." Ever. I told myself I wouldn't fall for it, but part of me needed to hear it. So I called Katie. She didn't sound convinced either. "If you go, I'll go with you." So we went together. Same house, same living room, but this time no guests, no fake smiles. Just them sitting across from us again. My mom stood up when we walked in. My dad stayed seated, arms crossed, jaw tight. "We want to move on," my mom said. "We're tired of all the hate." I looked at them. "You sure that's not just because the money's gone?" She flinched. "That's not fair, is it?" Then came the twist. My dad leaned forward and said, "What if we made you co-owner of the house legally? Is what's fair. You've helped so much." I froze. It sounded almost generous. Too generous. Then I realized it wasn't an offer. It was bait. They weren't giving me anything. They were trying to tie me to the house, to them, legally, financially, permanently. They'd found a new leash dressed up as a reward. Katie looked at me, then back at them. "That's not what he needs. We're just trying to show goodwill," my mom said. "He says we never appreciated him. This is us showing we do." "And if I say no?" I asked. My dad shrugged. "You'll say no because you want to play the victim. You always have." There it was. The truth again. The crack in the mask. "I'm not taking anything from you," I said. "Not the house. Not your apologies. Not your guilt. You'll come crawling back," my dad said. "No," I said. "You just lost your last chance." I stood up. Katie followed. "I'll keep helping you," I said to her. "But not through them. Never again." She nodded, eyes wide but calm. I think that was the moment she finally, truly picked a side. We walked out together. Outside, she grabbed my arm. "You're done, aren't you?" "Yeah," I said. "For good this time." She moved out of their influence. A week later, she officially changed her mailing address. I started wiring her $900 monthly directly, and she sent me a message that nearly broke me. "You're the only one I can trust. You're the best brother I could have ever asked for." My parents tried a few more times. Emails, messages through relatives, even one half-hearted attempt to report fraud on the closed joint account. It didn't work. They stopped when they realized they didn't have anything left to take. No money, no power, no son. It has been 4 months since I walked out of their house for the last time. Since then, not a word from either of them. No calls, no emails, no letters disguised as guilt bombs. The group chat hasn't made a sound. I almost forgot it existed. At first, the silence felt strange. Like the eerie calm after a storm when you're waiting for something else to snap. I kept checking my inbox, expecting one last dramatic twist. A lawyer's letter, a wild accusation, a new manipulation tactic. But nothing came. And slowly, the silence stopped feeling like a warning. It started feeling like freedom. I'm sleeping better, not waking up with that weight on my chest. Wondering which crisis I'll be asked to fund or which favor will be framed as an obligation. I come home to peace now. Not stress. Not chaos. Not the constant hum of resentment building in the background. The old joint account sits inactive, untouched. I check it sometimes out of habit, half expecting to see a new attempt to access it, but it stays frozen, like a vault to a life I don't live anymore. Katie's doing better, too. Way better. She finally admitted she'd been holding her breath for the last 2 years, always worried about the strings attached to everything they gave her. Now that the money comes directly from me, no questions asked, she's calmer, lighter, different. She moved into a new place 2 weeks ago. I helped her carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs and watched her open her new front door like it actually belonged to her. No ghosts behind it. No parents threatening to use her as leverage. She sent me a voice message that night. No script, no pretense. "You're the only one who's never used me," she said. "You could have let me believe their lies forever. You didn't. You told the truth and you never stopped helping. You're my family now. You always were." It hit harder than I expected. I told her she was free now, too. She believed me this time. But just when I thought things had settled, something unexpected happened. A mutual acquaintance, someone I hadn't spoken to since high school, DM'd me on Instagram. They said they'd run into my parents at a small event a few towns over. Nothing fancy, just a local thing. But apparently, they were telling people they hadn't heard from me in months, and they were deeply worried that I had cut off all contact without warning, and that they feared I was involved with something unstable. They were spreading rumors again. Quiet ones, subtle ones. I didn't respond. I didn't care what the neighbors believed, but I screenshotted the message anyway and saved it just in case. Because people like them don't stop trying to control the story, even when they've lost the audience. Meanwhile, I've started planning something new. A move out of state. Something fresh. Far enough away that even accidental run-ins become impossible. I haven't told anyone yet, not even Katie. But I will, because the final step of letting go isn't just closing the door behind you. It's walking far enough away that you don't hear the knocking anymore. And this time, I won't be looking back. Now on to the next story. Story 8. My dad used my savings to buy my sister a new car. "She needs it now and you'll earn more," he said. I didn't say anything. I moved. This morning, I woke up to 25 missed calls. I was on the beach, the sun setting in the distance, my friend Emily laughing beside me as we sipped overpriced cocktails. It was the first real vacation I'd had in years, and I finally felt like I could breathe. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen expecting some random notification, but instead, I saw a bank alert. $55,000 withdrawn. At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe a glitch. But then my stomach sank as reality set in. That was my money, the money I had saved for years to buy my first apartment. There was only one possibility. My parents. They had access to my bank account. I had given it to them a long time ago thinking, they're my parents, I trust them. If anything ever happened to me, they'd be able to handle my finances. But I had made it clear, only use it for emergencies or something really important. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My fingers shook as I dialed my father's number. It rang and rang and rang. No answer. I called again. Nothing. Emily noticed my change in demeanor and asked what was wrong. But I couldn't even answer her. I called again. After 10 minutes of silence, my dad finally picked up. "What happened?" he said casually, as if I had called to chat about the weather. I didn't even say hello. "Why did you take $55,000 out of my account?" There was a pause. Then, as if I had just asked him what he had for dinner, He said, "Oh, that. Your sister finally got a good job. She has to be there tomorrow and we can't have her showing up at a prestigious place in a suit on a bus. So we withdrew the money and are going to buy her a new car." Bye. And he hung up. I just sat there staring at my phone. The sound of the waves and the chatter of the people around me all faded into a dull hum. Emily put her hand on my arm and asked what had happened. When I told her, her eyes widened in disbelief. She tried to calm me down, but I couldn't stay there. There was no way I was going to sit on that beach and pretend everything was fine while my parents used my life savings to buy my sister a car. The vacation was over. That night, I booked the first flight back to the States. We were supposed to stay 4 more days, but I couldn't wait. Emily understood, but I could tell she was disappointed. Still, she didn't argue. The next morning, as soon as we landed, I didn't even take her home. I called her a cab, apologized, and told her I had to go. She nodded, told me to call her later, and left. Then I drove straight to my parents' house. And there in the driveway, gleaming in the morning sun, was a brand new car. And that was just the beginning. I pulled into the driveway and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The brand new car shone in the sunlight like a slap in the face. My money, my life savings, sitting there in the form of a luxury vehicle my sister didn't even need. I took a deep breath and got out. The front door was open and I could hear laughter from inside. My parents and sister were just hanging out like nothing had happened, like they hadn't just robbed me blind. I walked in and my mom turned to me with a smile. "Oh, Ethan, you're home early. How was the trip?" I just stared at her. Was this a joke? Was she seriously acting like everything was normal? I looked at my dad, sipping his coffee like he didn't care, and then my sister, scrolling through her phone, not even looking up. "The trip," I finally said. "You mean the trip I had to cut short because my own parents stole $55,000 from me?" My dad sighed and put down his cup. "Ethan, don't be dramatic. We didn't steal anything." I blinked. "You took my money without asking and bought my sister a car. How is that not stealing?" My sister finally looked up from her cell phone. "Relax, Ethan. I needed a car. You'll make more money." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I turned back to my dad. "So what? You thought I wouldn't care? You thought I wouldn't notice?" My dad shrugged. "We knew you'd notice eventually, but it was necessary. She has a great job opportunity, and it wouldn't look good if she showed up on the bus." I was so angry I could barely think straight. "She doesn't even have the job yet, does she?" Silence. I looked at my sister. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Unbelievable. You took my money for a car she doesn't even need yet." My dad waved his hand dismissively. "She'll get it. Besides, we wanted to tell you. We just thought you'd understand." I turned and went back outside. I needed to think. I needed to breathe. But when I saw the car again, sitting there like a monument to their betrayal, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I turned back toward the house. "I'm taking the car back." My sister shot up from the couch. "What?" My dad frowned. "Ethan, don't be ridiculous." "I'm serious," I said. "I'm giving it back right now." And before they could stop me, I grabbed the keys off the counter and walked out the door. That's when all hell broke loose. Before I even got to the car, my sister came running after me screaming my name as if I had just announced that I was selling her organs. My parents were right behind her. "You can't take it," she yelled, grabbing my arm. "Watch me," I said, shaking her off and unlocking the car. My dad stepped in front of me. "Ethan, be reasonable. It's already paid for. It's done." I laughed. "Oh yeah? With whose money?" He sighed, rubbing his temples as if I were the one being difficult. "Just let it go. You'll earn it back. Your sister needed it." I pushed past him and got in the driver's seat. My mom yelled something, but I didn't listen. I started the car, backed out of the driveway, and drove away. My heart was pounding. This wasn't how I imagined spending my first day back. But if they thought I was just going to roll over and take it, they were out of their minds. I went straight to the dealership. All the way there, my sister kept calling me, then my mom, then my dad. I ignored them all. As I pulled into the lot, I felt a small wave of relief. Maybe this would be easy. I'd explain the situation, return the car, get my money back, and be done with it. I walked in and found a salesman. I have to return this car. It was bought with my money without my permission. The guy frowned. All right, sir. Do you have the bill of sale? I shook my head. No, my parents bought it, but it was with my money. I have the bank statement showing the withdrawal. He nodded slowly. Okay, let me check the system. What's the name on the purchase? I gave him my father's name. He typed for a moment, then stopped. His face changed. I didn't like that look. Sir, you're not the owner of the vehicle. I stared at him. What? He turned the screen a little so I could see. The car was registered to my sister. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. No, that's impossible. They bought it with my money. I understand, he said. But legally, your sister is the owner. Only she can return it or sell it. I took a step back, my hands shaking. My parents hadn't just stolen from me. They made sure I couldn't even take the car back. My phone buzzed. My sister again. This time I answered. You registered the car in your name? She giggled. She really giggled. Duh. It's my car. I hung up. I couldn't even speak. I got back in the car and just sat there. My own family had tricked me. They took my money, bought a car, and made sure I had no legal claim to it. But they underestimated me. I took out my cell phone and started making calls. If they wanted to play dirty, I could play dirty. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel so tightly I thought it might break in half. My own parents had legally barred me from getting my money back. My sister's smug little giggle was still ringing in my ears. I wasn't going to let this go. I started making calls. First, my bank. Maybe I could dispute the withdrawal? No luck. Since I had given my parents access, the transaction was technically authorized. Next, I called some friends to see if anyone knew a good lawyer. Most of them were as shocked as I was, offering sympathy but not much help. Finally, my friend Mark came through. I know a guy. Real aggressive. You'll like him. He sent me the number and I didn't waste a second. I called right there in the dealership parking lot. The lawyer, Tom, picked up after 2 rings. Tell me everything, he said. I laid it all out. My parents taking my money, buying the car in my sister's name, locking me out of getting it back. Tom listened, then said, "This isn't just a civil case. This could be fraud." That got my attention. I put him on speakerphone and went to my parents' house. My mom, dad, and sister were sitting in the living room, probably expecting me to come back defeated. Instead, I leaned against the wall with my arms crossed and said, "Hey Dad, Mom, Sis, say hello to my lawyer." Their faces fell. Tom didn't waste any time. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, your son has informed me of your recent unauthorized use of his funds. As it stands, this could constitute financial fraud, theft, and misrepresentation. If Ethan decides to press charges, you could be in serious legal trouble." Silence. Then my sister snapped. "He wouldn't do that. We're family." Tom laughed. "Family doesn't steal 55 grand. My dad cleared his throat. "Ethan, be reasonable. This is unnecessary." "No," I said, staring straight at him. "What's unnecessary is that you think I'm going to let this slide." Tom continued, "Well, we have options here. Ethan could take civil action, which would be expensive and public, or you could resolve this immediately. The car needs to be sold and the money returned, or we'll take legal action." My sister's face turned pale. My mother looked like she was going to cry. My father, for the first time, looked genuinely unsure. I let the silence drag on. Then I looked at them and said, "You're screwed." And I meant it. My dad crossed his arms. "We're not selling the car." Tom sighed on the phone. "All right, Ethan. I'll start drawing up the legal papers. This will go to court." My mom panicked. Wait. Let's talk about this." Tom didn't even acknowledge her. "Ethan, you need to document everything. Every text, every bank statement, every conversation. We need to prove intent." My sister jumped in. "What does that mean?" I grinned. "It means I'm going to make your life very difficult. And then I walked out. I wasn't bluffing. I went straight to Emily's house. Her parents were there, and when they saw the anger on my face, they immediately sat me down. I told them everything. Emily's father, Mike, used to work in finance. He listened, nodded, then leaned back in his chair. They think they're smart, but they're idiots. I looked at him. What do you mean? They bought the car in your sister's name, but they used your money. I frowned. Yes, that's the problem. No, he said. That's the solution. Then he told me exactly what to do. The next morning, I was at the DMV when it opened. I asked for a record of the purchase of the vehicle. Since I had proof that my money had been used, I filed a fraud report. They flagged the car, which meant my sister couldn't sell it, transfer it, or do anything legal with it until the issue was resolved. Then, I went to my bank and froze the rest of my account, preventing any further withdrawals from my parents. By that afternoon, I had filed a police report for unauthorized use of funds. I didn't press charges yet, but I made sure it was on the record. That's when my dad called. You went to the police? Yes, I said, sipping my coffee. And the DMV. Oh, and my bank. He lost it. You're tearing this family apart over a car. No, I said. You did that when you stole from me. My mom got on the phone and sobbed. Ethan, please. We didn't think it would come to this. I almost laughed. You mean you didn't think I would fight back? Silence. Then my sister picked up the phone, her voice shaking. You locked the car? Yep. She screamed like an infant. That's when I knew I had won. The next morning, my phone exploded. My dad, my mom, my sister, they were all calling and texting me nonstop. I ignored every single one of them. Then my sister sent me a text that actually made me laugh out loud. You ruined my life. I can't even drive my car anymore. Hope you're happy. I was very happy, but I wasn't done yet. Later that day, I got a call from Tom, my attorney. They tried to transfer the car to another name this morning. I almost choked on my drink. What? Yeah, they probably thought they could just register it under your dad or mom instead. But since you filed that fraud suit, the DMV flagged it. They're stuck. I shook my head. They really think they can get around this? Oh, they're panicking, Tom said. I also got a call from a lawyer they hired. That got my attention. They have a lawyer? Yep. He wanted to see if we'd negotiate dropping the fraud suit. I laughed. Did you send him to a mental institution? Not exactly, but close. Things were moving fast for them, and I was enjoying every second of it. But then something happened I wasn't expecting. That night, Emily's dad, Mike, called me. Ethan, your dad just showed up at my house. I jumped out of my chair. What? He wants to talk to you. He looks defeated. I sighed. What did he say? He wants to meet. He says he wants to fix things. I rubbed my temples. After everything, after they tried to go behind my back again, now my dad wanted to talk? Mike's voice dropped. I don't trust him, but it's your decision. I exhaled slowly. I wasn't sure what my dad was up to, but one thing was clear. He was desperate, and I was about to find out why. I agreed to meet my father, but on my terms. No home field advantage for him. I told him to meet me at a coffee shop near Emily's house. A public place, neutral ground. He showed up looking 10 years older, as if the stress of the last few days had eaten away at him. He sat down, rubbed his face, and sighed. Ethan, this has gone too far. I sipped my coffee. No, it hasn't gone far enough. He shook his head. Your mother is a wreck. Your sister is in pieces. You really want to drag this through the courts? You want to destroy this family over a misunderstanding. I clenched my jaw. A misunderstanding? You stole 55 grand from me. We didn't steal it, he snapped, then immediately lowered his voice when a few people looked over. We just borrowed it. I scoffed. You registered the car in her name. That's not borrowing. That's making sure I could never take it back. He exhaled through his nose. Okay, fine. We made a mistake. But your sister needs that job. She needs that car. She doesn't even have the job yet. I shot back. You stole my money for a car she doesn't need. He He leaned forward. Ethan, we don't have the money to pay you back. I froze. He sighed heavily. We thought we could, but things are tight. If you force us to sell the car, we'll lose money on it and we still won't have enough. I stared at him. Then why the hell did you think it was okay? He didn't answer. He just sat there looking miserable. For the first time, I could see the cracks in him, the fear, the regret. Not because he cared about what he had done to me, but because he realized he had backed himself into a corner. I sat back and crossed my arms. So what do you want from me? He swallowed hard. We need time. Just a few months. I'll figure something out and pay you back. I tilted my head. And I'm supposed to trust you after all this? Silence. Then he said something that sent a shiver down my spine. If you take this to court, we could lose the house. I blinked. What? The house is in bad shape financially, he admitted. Legal fees, forced repayment. It could put us over the edge. I stared at him. I knew my parents weren't rolling in money, but I didn't know it was that bad. For a brief second, I felt something close to guilt. Then I remembered what they had done to me. I took a slow breath. That's not my problem. His face fell. He had expected me to give in. I stood up. You have one option. Sell the car now and return whatever money you can. If you don't, I'll take this all the way and I don't care what happens to the house. His hands clenched into fists. Ethan, please. I walked out. I had given them an out. If they didn't take it, then whatever happened next was on them. I didn't hear from my dad after that meeting. No texts, no calls, nothing. I figured he was scrambling, trying to figure out his next move. Then, 2 days later, my mom showed up unannounced at Emily's house. Her eyes were red, as if she'd been crying for days. She grabbed my hands. Ethan, please, just drop it. I pulled away. Did you sell the car? She shook her head. Your sister refuses. I laughed bitterly. Then I guess we're done here. Tears rolled down her face. You don't understand what you're doing. Your father is trying to refinance the house. If this goes to court, that's his problem. I interrupted. Not mine, she sobbed. But we're family. I just stared at her. No, family doesn't steal from each other. She didn't have an answer. That night, my father finally called. His voice was tight. We're selling the car. I exhaled. Good. The dealership offered 20% less than we paid. But it's done. That's not my problem, I said. He was silent. Then finally, we'll wire you the money tomorrow. The next morning, I got the notice. $43,000 deposited. It wasn't all of it, but it was enough. Enough for me to cut my ties. I packed my bags, grabbed my essentials, and left my parents' house for good. Emily's family took me in without hesitation. Her dad even helped me set up a new bank account that my parents would never have access to. And just like that, I was free. A week later, my sister texted me, I hope you're happy. We lost money because of you. I blocked her number. I wasn't just happy. I was finally at peace. After the money hit my account, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. It wasn't the full $55,000, but I had enough to move forward. I wasn't going to waste any more time on people who saw me as their personal ATM. The next day, I cut the last cord. I went back to my parents' house one last time. Not to argue, not to fight, but to get the rest of my stuff. When I walked in, my father barely looked at me. My mom tried to guilt me one last time. We were only trying to help your sister. I didn't even acknowledge it. I packed my bags, grabbed my papers, and left without another word. A few weeks later, I made a down payment on an apartment. Smaller than I had originally planned, but mine, truly mine. I didn't tell my parents. They found out through a relative and texted me. My dad sent a simple congratulations. But my mom, she wrote a paragraph about how family should stick together and how one day I'd regret cutting them off. I left her message on read. And my sister? She never got the job. Turns out she wasn't even the first choice, and they went with another candidate. So all that, the stolen money, the car, the drama, it was all for nothing. I heard she had to buy a used car with her own money. Poetic justice. I wasn't angry anymore. I had my life back and, most importantly, I'd learned a lesson I'd never forget. Blood doesn't mean trust, and I'd never make the mistake of trusting them again. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.